Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for today's budget work session, where we will spend some time with our Department of Technology Services, as well as Arlington Economic Development, and the partnerships and business improvement districts that fall under the auspices of AED as well. We are going to start with DTS. We'll begin with Jack Belcher, followed by remarks from the chair of our Tech Advisory Commission, Mary Crannell, and then we'll move into AED. Following that, hear remarks from Avril Usery-Sisk, who is chair of the EDC, the Economic Development Commission, and Anika Quinana, chair of our Arts Commission. And then we will hear from our partnerships. Ms. Kim Klingler is here on behalf of Columbia Pike Partnership, Ginger Brown from Langston Boulevard Alliance, and Kieran Daly representing the Clarendon Alliance. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we'll hear from our business improvement districts. Mary Claire Burek representing the Roslyn BID, Tracy Gabriel representing National Landing, depending on timing, potentially Tina Leone from the Ballston BID. She is in the air as we speak, I think, and so we'll see if she's been able to land in time. And of course, I will pause for board member questions in between and among all of those. For those following us along at home, a reminder that you can find the whole of the budget as well as today's slides posted at arlingtonva.us. Before we begin with DTS, I just wanted to take a moment and share with Mr. Belcher, his colleagues, on behalf of all of us on their board, our condolences and shared sadness that Rick Sternitsky, who has been the Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the county, passed away this weekend. So, Mr. Belcher, we know it's a really close-knit team, and we will certainly be thinking of his passing and you and your colleagues in the days ahead.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I have here my staff online. Holly Hartel, who's our Deputy CIO for Strategic Initiatives. Richard Aschenbar, who's our Director of Security, Records, and Compliance. David Hurley, Director of Digital Innovation. Elise Stugge, who's our Director of Enterprise Applications. Kevin Dolan, who's acting as the Director of Infrastructure and Operations. Adil Asaf, who is recently a county intern, is now a full-time employee of the county, and he's working in our capital finance area, and Gilbert Pisano, who's our budget director. I thank you so much for recognizing Richard. This presentation is his. He put it together. He came with immense background from the private sector, and it's so hard to make that transition at times from the private sector to the local government, but he did, and he did it with a passion. So we hope we do him honor in presenting this presentation today for him. So thank you so much. With that, start off, we continue to have the same themes as a department, and that is resiliency and sustainment of what we have from our infrastructure, innovation, which is so critical to the county and how we move forward, and equity, which are core principles for us as a department. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Gilbert Pisano, who can give us a discussion of the actual budget itself. Gilbert?
Hello, and thank you for taking the time to review our budget with us. So DTS has had some significant accomplishments over the past year. Some of these accomplishments fall within the categories of innovation, the virtual workplace, and COVID response and recovery. I'll go ahead and address a few of those in each category. But under innovation, DTS launched the new public-facing website, which services the county and the community as well. DTS also partnered with AED for the Small Business Grants 2.0 application, and DTS also partnered with Library for the Summer Reading application. Under Virtual Workplace, DTS received the County Manager's Excellence Award for virtualizing courts. And under COVID Response and Recovery, DTS received the County Manager's Excellence Award for VCAMS. That's the contract tracing application, which was formerly known as ACTS. And to discuss equity, I'd like to hand it over to Holly Hartel. She's the DTS lead for digital equity.
Thank you very much, Gilbert, and thank you, Jack, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to speak and share. Before we get to our equity questions, I do want to highlight that the leadership of digital equity has shifted to CPHD. Now, while we are still very involved, the move will allow the effort to be driven from a business perspective to make sure that policy outcomes and strategies and goals within the department are the focus for the customer. While CPHD has taken the lead, DPS will continue to work with them as well as libraries and other departments as we need to drive for the next steps. When we consider our equity questions, the who is burdened, who is missing, and how do we know, we've done a lot in the past. The historical work has allowed the county to become very aware and build a deeper understanding of the need. It has provided data points, nuances of what it means, and an understanding that we need to know more. While we know there are multiple reasons that impact people, we do not have enough information. What we're doing is collaborating with a broadband study led by CPHD. The study will provide a needs assessment as well as an analysis of the best model to support the provision of broadband for who needs it within the county. The study is currently in a procurement process. Well, what do we do? Well, once we get the results of the study, the hope is that it will provide direction and guidance of the next steps, and we will be able to identify who benefits. While we're working on the study, that does not necessarily mean that things are stopping. We partnered recently with UVA in helping us not only dig deeper into some of the data, but also to think about insights that will give us information to support the study. UVA reached out to the county to work on a data commons. It's a consolidation of data across not only our county, but also with the hope that it could be used region-wide, and starting with Arlington County. The data effort addressed a number of different equity areas across multiple departments within the county, including equity indices and geography, stability of food access, and digital equity. In terms of equity, we're looking at, is there a measurable difference, both current and over time, in the availability of broadband, and what does it mean, and how do we measure it? Initial insights from the data has given us some glimpses into broadband speeds that are across census tracts and the availability of internet costs and how that is impacted within the community. Well, what else are we doing? We spoke last year about our 19 Wi-Fi hotspots. We currently have 26 outdoor Wi-Fi hotspots with data that is available on our open data portal. We are hoping to coordinate, or we'll be coordinating with parks to provide 2 more in the near future. But currently we have all of the libraries, 13 community centers and parks, 3 fire stations, as well as 3 government offices. If you'll go to the next slide, Gilbert. You can see the location of where the hotspots are. They're focused primarily in areas of need, but we also have them throughout the county at different facilities to make sure that no matter where you are, you have access to the internet. What this will help us do is that the underserved has more options to make sure they can connect to the internet. We are also working not only with what our resources, but partnering with Comcast to ensure that additional community anchor institutions have connectivity. We worked with Comcast to provide 2 additional lift zones within the Macedonian Baptist Church in Serrano. And we will continue to make sure that we are doing our part to increase digital equity within the county. The last thing I want to say is that we are also using the equity lens in all of our projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Holly. So moving into the FY2023 budget, there's some highlights that I wanted to point out, which is our budget prioritized the growing need for increased cybersecurity. This is an area that continues to grow year over year and is highly significant. Also, a highlight is the need to adapt to emerging technologies. And then with that, also the need to develop and reskill our workforce to support those ongoing and emerging technologies. The FY2023 budget includes an expenditure budget increase of $2.2 million. That brings the FY2023 proposed budget to $29 million. That's an 8% increase. It's important to point out that $833,000 of that includes personnel increases, which was part of the 4.5 merit increase, and then $876,000 of that includes contractual increases, and that's to support enterprise-wide operations for software and applications, any of the services that we provide enterprise-wide. That includes Microsoft for $626,000. Another example is the DocuSign contract, which increased $62,000, and obviously Prism support increased $58,000 as well. Within the FY2023 budget, we also are proposing an increase of 1 FTE for the department, bringing the total FY2023 proposed FTEs to 91, up from 90. The FY2023 budget, the changes that are that are built into that includes the contractual increases of $876,000, which we previously discussed. It also includes the addition of one FTE, which is a cybersecurity engineer. That expenditure is $185,000. And $240,000 of that is for the ERP maintenance contractor to provide ongoing support to PRISM. And finally, the budget includes $115,000 one-time funding for technical training for staff, training for technical staff and development of that staff. I'll hand it over to Jack to close up on the key consideration or the key budget considerations.
Thank you, Gilbert. One of the areas that we're all concerned about in this era of resignation, as they call it, are we losing a workforce, and are we able to retain it? If you look at our numbers from March of 2020 until this week, March of 2022, we've lost a total of 3 staff out of 91. One was an intern who was offered a significant amount of money to go work for a hedge fund, a graduate of Wakefield High School, junior college grad, and product of our program, and we wish him very well. One was my deputy, who became the Chief Technology Officer for Loudoun County, and then one who was decided to go back to the federal government. The question is, why are we not suffering that pain that other departments are? I think might be a question that's for. I think it's a combination of a number of factors. One, exciting work. People come here, they feel they're doing things, they got responsibility, they can make things happen. As in the case of Richard Stanitsky, who we refer to, did many, many things that resulted in lots and lots of money. But you know what? He got a lot of kick of doing things like this to bring service back to the community. I think it's also the fact that our pay is equal to what other jurisdictions are facing. And then lastly, I think what it comes down to is accommodation. We have the type of work we do doesn't require staff to be on site 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now, saying that, they work far more hours than they get paid for because they just love their job. But it's a combination of those factors all coming together. And we haven't had the poaching, as you might see in other jurisdictions, and we've been able to retain a good portion of our workforce. And I think that's a highlight that we ought to keep in mind and say that, we're doing a good job in many areas, and this is one area. Another area we have is the whole idea of reskilling and retooling our workforce. There's a saying in technology, something called Moore's Law. And Moore's Law says that the pace of technology is increasing at twice the pace every year, every 2 years it changes. That's all changed. I'm reading a book right now called 2030, What's the World Going to Look Like Then? And they're saying that the technology change we're experiencing now, through COVID, the different work environment, we're working harder and more productively than we ever have. And they're saying that what used to be done in 10 years now can be done in 12 to 18 months. That's how fast the pace is changing, how fast it's coming at us. So it's very important that we look at our workforce and say, not so much what are we going to do when the vacancies come up? Do we fill what they did as we originally advertised it? Or do we look to where we're going to be? And so what our goal is to find out how do we make sure that we're acquiring the skills we're going to need tomorrow, not so much today. Training. We're putting money in our budget for training for a reason. There are emerging trends, as I talked about before, that are coming up. Cloud, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data. It's all changing how we work and operate. One area that we're very concerned about in Arlington, and we're going to be releasing very shortly, a cloud migration strategy. The word cloud's bounced around to everybody. What does it mean? Well, we can give definition to it. And we have to look at it from the point of view of what it means to the county. Right now, we have 2 data centers. We maintain servers, we monitor them, manage them, whatever. And there's an analogy about going to the cloud, and I don't want to bore you with this, but I think it's important. It's the pizza delivery discussion. You want to make a pizza, you can go out, buy the ingredients, mend the dough, get it cooked, and then produce it. And that's what you're doing, in fact, is doing it, buying everything and making it together. Then they came out with products like you could buy a pizza in a box, bring that pizza home, stick it in the oven and cook it. Save some work, right? Well, we were, as a county, we were at that first stage, let's make our own pizza. And we need to think about why are we doing that? Is it really something we should be doing, or should we be looking ahead to something else? Well, what could that be? Well, maybe we call it pizza delivery service. And they bring the pizza to the house. You take your selection of what you want. They've done the cooking. They've done the arrangements, and you have it. And then you concentrate on just eating it and preparing the meal. And then lastly, we can go across the bar to the fireworks. We can make a reservation and go in and order the pizza there. What we want, and then all you worry about is paying the bill and going home. What we want to do is get out of the business maintaining servers, hardware, and having people to support that. What we want to do is let somebody else do it. So it's called abstracting the operating system, the backup, the maintenance from the actual production of the product, and have our staff focus on what it is they're trying to do. You have that capability now of buying that and going over to fireworks when you use Office 365. That's the way that works. We have very little to do with it. Microsoft maintains it, they provide the service. All you have to do is how to use it. And that's where we want to get. So it's taking our workforce and giving them a goal to achieve in terms of what their skill set should be. Lastly, we have to look at our workforce as it is. I'm sorry, losing my voice here. What it comes down to is we have to, what they call, democratize our technology. If we think central IT can do everything, we're mistaken. The demands of our departments to do more, faster, are just growing. And so why should central IT be the only source of doing that? Every workforce we have in the county is having people come into it now that are skilled in the use of technology, whether it be gamification, whether it be they doing things at home in a different way. And then they come into the workforce and they find out that in many ways we're doing things the way we were doing them for 30 years before. And so if we can create what I call communities of interest, competency centers that can take the load off the central IT, then all of a sudden we've done a couple of things. Lessen the burden of my staff, my office, but more than that, encourage staff who are coming into the county who will never want to work for me in IT, but want to be in the fire department, health and human services, the libraries, environmental services, to be productive and to do away with some of the antiquated processes they're working with now. So that's another goal we have. Lastly, I wanted to say, and leave you with this, is that the budget you see today is a budget that talks about how we keep the lights on and manage the IT shop here. We do much more than that. We're out there talking about digital equity. We're talking to schools about how we can make sure that the underserved are served. We're looking at housing. How can we provide broadband housing services there in a way that we haven't done before? We're talking to our partners in the community, in the education community, that are using these new technologies. And so while we're doing that, is to get an understanding of where the world's going. If the world's truly changing every 12 to 18 months, then we've got to be sure that we're protecting the security and privacy of the county. And the best way to do that is be involved in understanding what they're trying to achieve. I apologize for losing my voice, but that's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher. Some big ideas in there, really interesting. Let's begin with comments from Ms. Crannell on behalf of the Technology Advisory Commission, and then we'll move to conversation with the board. Ms. Crannell, are you with us virtually?
I am. Thank you. Thanks so much. Hello. And would also like to echo our condolences from the Commission to the DTS staff regarding Richard. And certainly the staff is a close-knit staff. So we did send a letter to the county, and my apologies, Madam Chair. I managed to spell your name right once, but not twice. So please,
it's a challenge.
Please,
no problem.
We will. No. You'd think with my name beginning with C, I could do that, but no. So we'll make sure that gets noted. There were just three things we wanted to highlight in this time. One is the comprehensive digital plan. We really think that with Amazon being here, and as Jack referred to, is the time velocity and of the changes that will come with tech, that we really need as a county to think about our digital future. And the way to do that is really have a digital planning process. So we are still advocating that. And then number two is cyber decision making. Certainly we applaud the the addition of the FTE, but we also think from a policy point of view that the board really needs to look at what they would do in the case of a breach, and the technical capability is one side, the policy is another. So we would advocate that those come together and be aligned. And then the third is really that link, as Holly was referring to digital equity. We really think there's a link between digital equity and digital privacy, that really you all as policymakers are the ones who will be able to protect those who can't protect themselves. You know, as we look out to 2030, really people with means will be able to protect their data privacy, their digital privacy, much more than those who are not. So we really look at this as an equity issue, and asking the question in terms of what are our policies from a board point of view, a governance point of view, and how is that everywhere in terms of that framework. And so that's something that we really would advocate, that that there is money set aside to look at some of those things and support that. There's certainly policies that or practices that have been collected by the county, but really looking at it in terms of an overarching policy and how that impacts digital equity. And we applaud the commitment of the DTS. Certainly this 2 years has proven that without the framework that they and the enterprise that they run, the county wouldn't have been able to get its job done. So thank you so much for this time.
Thank you. And you've given us a lot to ask and follow up on, so we appreciate that very much. I am now going to open the floor for questions for colleagues. As I wait for lights to come on, I'll ask one myself. So, Mr. Belcher, your point about the future of abstracting and getting out of the business of maintaining servers and hardware was really interesting. It does connect to another point that I noted in the presentation, which is what seems, at least, lacking any other context, a pretty staggering contractual increase for just Microsoft services alone, right, of over $500,000. I am interested in knowing, obviously, this is, I think, probably to some extent always a challenge when we privatize or contract out for services, but we are, to put a fine point on it, a little over a barrel, right, when it comes to the vendors that we work with. Obviously, our entire system is networked into Microsoft Office now, and it would be very hard for us to, kind of competitively rebid that without a pretty significant shift. And so I guess my question is twofold. The first is, how do we structure those contracts so that we have, at the point of decision-making of entering into a system dependency like that, have the opportunity to make sure that we're fairly handling any increases and can negotiate them downward when we don't necessarily have as much leverage. And then two, as we think about the future of abstracting, which makes a lot of sense, how do we, again, make sure there's some opportunity for competitiveness or leverage among the vendors we may be contracting with, to make sure that once we've gotten rid of our pizza ovens, that Fireworks Pizza can't just raise their pizza prices 4 times as much and we're on the hook?
Very important. Can I start with the latter and go back to the first? I think the latter question is so important. The concept is, if you have a place to go to get pizza now, but there are other places you can go to. We have to have that flexibility. They call that a hybrid cloud. Okay. And so the concept behind that is the world has moved to an environment where they're doing things more and more in a cloud environment where it's being orchestrated. And the same orchestration that's being used by Microsoft is being used by Google. It's being used by Amazon Web Services. It's being used by Oracle. And it's a Linux-based framework, as Mr. Tajonas knows. And what that is based upon is developing capabilities that can be easily moved from one location to another location very easily. Think about this. When I first started getting into computers, I was being trained as an historian at Georgetown. And they said, "Do you want to make some money?" I said, "Sure." They said, "No one wants to take this job, but we need an operator to run the machine." It was a mainframe. And what I would do is, I was the most powerful man on the campus, because people would come to me, give them what they call punch cards. I would then put them into the machine, and I'd produce reports. And if I didn't like the person, I wouldn't run the report. Never.
Far too ethical.
But what we're going to is that type of environment with the cloud. And they've all adopted the same way to manage. And it's the same way that I was a physical operator. They have now virtual operators in the cloud, and they're the same if you're in Oracle, the same if you're in Azure, which is Microsoft, or you're in Amazon Web Services. So what we have to do is to make sure that when we enter these agreements, we do a couple of things. One, there's a bar you've got to get over to go to the cloud. You just don't say you want to go to the cloud. You have to have a cloud environment that's what they call FedRAMP certified or state ramp certified, that does risk analysis, cybersecurity analysis on a regular basis, and it has exit clauses. This says, by the way, you're not using the data we put there in a way we should be using it, and we're going to pull it out and we're going to move it somewhere else. And it has to be easily moved from place to place as necessary. So from that perspective, in the strategy we're going to be publishing, it says if you pass that bar that says you qualify to move to the cloud, then you're going to have a choice of where to go. And what we're going to do, we're going to put you in an environment that's going to control the cost the county's going to account. Right now, if in the environment we have the pizza making analogy where I go and make the pizza and we put up the servers, I have to come cat in hand with a capital request every 2 years and say I need money for servers. In this environment we're going to, that won't happen. If I need to scale up, they'll scale up. If I need to scale down, they'll scale down. The other thing it'll do, it'll look at consumption. See, the big cost is not putting the data in the cloud, it's getting the data out of the cloud. And so if we have data we're going to need on a regular basis, and we're going to have to do that. Mm-hmm. As we move to this new world, we're going to be making data-driven decisions where it's going to require instant access to information. We're going to be moving data back and forth. Example, I want to find a parking space. You want to know when the space is available. You want to be able to go get it. You don't want to have to send that transaction out to Loudoun County and then to India to have them come back and present the data back to you. You want it here locally. The faster you move that data, the more expensive it is. All of these organizations, what they're doing, they're monitoring the consumption. And they're saying, look, what you're doing right here is a high consumption, high cost. So we're going to recommend we move this locally. And we keep the data you don't use that often away and keep that in what they call cold storage. Why is that important? Security, privacy, all those things follow. So that's the answer to the back end of the question. First end of the question is, again, it's a competitive world. What Amazon's offering, AWS, Microsoft's offering, Google's offering. And so what we have to do is make sure we're getting the best competitive price. And then, again, back to that exit strategy. If we decide those costs have gone up farther than we want, we've got to have the flexibility to pull out of it and go someplace else. And we have to control it. And so by doing that now, we're going from a CapEx to an OpEx model in terms of payment. That's going to require skill sets, not only in my shop, but in DMF to monitor the movement of that data back and forth. I hope that some way.
Does, I guess,
this is me over here.
Voice of
the voice of God. Because I know Jack doesn't like to talk about this very much, but it's, I think, a very direct answer to your question, which is that when you're facing, it's not a monopoly, but when you have something like Microsoft, which really controls a huge chunk of the market, we in the National Capital Region have an opportunity, which we have left aside, to join with our sister jurisdictions to gather our buying power together. And Jack has been working very diligently over the last 6 months in the area of cybersecurity to say, when it comes to cyber insurance, when it comes to assessments, let's band together, because together we will be able to get a better price on some things. You know, the town of Dumfries or Occoquan hasn't got a prayer when it comes to getting these kinds of services, and if they're compromised, we're compromised too. But it also goes to the purchase of products with Microsoft. So we're starting with something that we think has absolute appeal. We happen to know the chair of the COG board this year. We've talked to him about it, and we are, you know, everything that Jack said is absolutely true, but at the end of the day, gathering our buying power together will lead to better terms because they have us over a barrel. Did I miss anything, Jack?
That's it, shared services. How can we do that? And why somebody may say in cybersecurity, which, by the way, will be before the CAOs next month in April, a comprehensive plan to provide for a baseline across the region. So why, somebody may say to us, why are you worried about Dumfries? Why are you worried about Tacoma Park? we're only as strong as the weakest link we have in our network. And if we're going to get hit, and by the way, we're close. I mean, Richard Archambault is on the phone, and he can talk exactly to what's going on. But there are a lot of people rattling our doors. They want to get inside. And if we have somebody who doesn't have the resources, the money to do it, it doesn't matter what money I get from Mark and you appropriate for us, we can't defend ourselves. But shared services, talking to Council of Governments, they believe together we have more buying power than New York City does. You believe it? And so when I start, and I go to talk to Amazon, and I talk to Microsoft, they listen. Because if it's just Arlington County, who cares? But if you've got the entire region lined up, saying we could do this, and it could be simple things like joint buying of PCs, service, rack space, staff augmentation. And I think there's an opportunity there. Now, some states, Maryland, has these requirements that say you can't buy out of the state or whatever. So we're going to have to work through that. But I think there's a great opportunity, as Mark says, to really to leverage something we haven't leveraged. I don't think in the years when you and I have been here, we have not leveraged that at all. Yeah. Not because we haven't tried, it's just...
Be more secure and we won't see price jumps contractual increases this large in the future, right?
But
So that's
the question is, what drives a contractual increase? Is that more services, or is it, so for example, could you make an argument and say, look, we pay 600,000 and change more, but we avoid to have to hire 2 or 3 more people, or we avoid to, have to try to find the services somewhere else. So there is a value added to that. It's not just an increase in price. I understand the bundling very well, very well. I mean, congratulations, this is great. You just build a far bigger customer who has it's like, it's like you have a better negotiating position because, but at the same time, we commit all our workflows or our, how organizations really lock into a system. And I agree with the manager. Yes, it is a oligopoly. Even the services you mentioned are like 3 or 4, and they're hardly competitive to each other. They segment the market. So the question is, how can we get, so first of all, understanding well why this increase? Is that, are we consuming more? Or that could be, right? There are services that are, charged as used. And what is the benefit from that? Are we getting more value out of that? Because the reason why Microsoft has been so successful is because they provided something that was extremely productive, right? I mean, there was value for the customer as well as for the supplier. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, I know that cities, entire regions have, played with the idea of, changing, of going open source, for example, etc. There is a mixed bag of stories to tell about this. But we are where we are. The question is, why is it so? What drives the increase?
Yeah, good point. Well, certainly there's a profit margin. They see the opportunity there. You're exactly right, and you're beholden to them because of the agreements you get in, and you can limit the extent of the increase, and usually the term is 3 years or 5 years, and you can limit the term. But frankly, they are the show in town, and there are a lot of us who think there are other products just as good that could do that just as well. The problem is your base of people you're getting are trained in Microsoft. It's like the university communities; they would like us to use Google Mail, like to use the Google product line. When a number of years ago, I had the the CIO for the federal government was a gentleman named Vivek Kundra. He worked for me here in Arlington County. He went there and became Obama's CIO. And he introduced me to I got to be careful what I say because I believe Eric Schmidt's in the neighborhood, lives in here now. But he introduced me to Eric Schmidt. And Eric is, if you don't know, was head of Alphabet and whatever. And Eric said the same thing. We're making a decision on whether or not to stay with Microsoft. And he said, I can do a better job than Microsoft can do on this. Become a Google shop. Have Gmail as your primary email system. Attractive. I mean, you've got a person who can make it happen. The challenge is when you delve down, there isn't the resource. It may work in a university to do collaboration, but once you leave the university, you're going into and I hate to say it, a Microsoft world. In Microsoft, that's the business world we're going into. So they have the edge there, and it's a difficult thing. The cost savings too, I think we gotta, if we really buy into this concept of going to a cloud migration, going to that pizza concept again, it has repercussions across the enterprise. Right now, we have 2 major data centers, one upstairs, one somewhere else in the county, right? And we have people who pay for air conditioning, they pay for heating, they pay for security, they pay for maintenance, and every so many years, we gotta go redo it because it gets old. The question I'm asking my staff, and we're talking to DES about is, should we be in that business? And if we shouldn't be in that business, what's the cost differentiation going to be? We're not doing that. Probably, when you match, it's probably not that much. But when you look at the other factors to that, available space that could be used for other purposes, then all of a sudden there starts to be a discussion about that. So you ask a good question, and I don't have a good answer.
Okay.
Ms. Garvey? Okay, mulling that over.
Well, one's been answered, and then I keep coming with it further.
Okay, great. Mr. DeFranti?
On that, the brevity and clarity that the manager's comment, I think this is I'd love to see progress through COG over the next 6 months, and so I'm inclined to say less and hope that we follow up on your narrow point, if that makes sense. And it is complicated, but I don't want to get lost in the details and not just think root on you, Mr. Dorsey, and the manager on that one. And so the only other question I have is on a separate topic, and I want to, but it's...
Do you want to follow up on the contracts? Then take it away.
Great. So slide 5, digital equity. Slide 5 shows a map, and I'm wondering how, I know the purchasing is working on the RFP that's slated for fiscal '23, so I imagine we're 9 months to a year before we hear back. That's CPHD's work plan, but we're a good chunk of time before we hear back on that RFP. Do you have any sense of timing on that?
Yeah, Holly, you want to speak to that? Holly's my digital equity person here.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate the question. I would say in the sense of timing, so as you mentioned, it is being run by CPHD, but that sense of timing seems to align with some of the thoughts and what I'm aware of at this point. And then you were going to ask, I think, a question about the map?
Yes. In light of that timing, it sort of prompts the question, and this is dangerous to look at the waves there that are on slide 5. It seems like Buckingham is not covered by a wave. And so that would be something I'd love to follow up on, because you've described them very technically, Mr. Manager, as blasters from time to time. But, I just want to make sure we're covering the census tracts where there's the greatest need, because we're going to have a little longer time in the study. And I see you're saying the voice of God is saying
yes, no, not the voice of God, but, Mr. Karantonis and I were talking about this last week, which is that I'm optimistic that the study on digital equity that we're doing will yield results. But without wearing down this too much, Barcroft. We have an opportunity as we go in to essentially remake that part of the county where we have a number of people who are living in committed affordable units. It's already been worked into some of the we have a template on how to work with our affordable housing providers to make sure that everyone who is living there has broadband that is effective and affordable. And that will be part of the deal that we end up with. So while we're studying, we'll be doing.
Great, and I might follow up on getting to a specific neighborhood other than Barcroft, which is super important, and Buckingham. I might follow up with an email just to work on that to sort of see if we've covered that area as a whole. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as every year, this is always an incredibly fascinating discussion. But I want to amplify some of the points that were raised by the Tech Commission in their letter, which I, happen to think were well articulated, and particularly just thinking about future capacity and what might be, in your view, future asks that come from DTS, because at least to my mind, I agree that comprehensive planning for IT is absolutely essential, given that it's underlying every single thing that we do within government. And It seems that we need to not only think about how we're going to maintain the work that we do in the future, but also to figure out how we're going to foster innovation, which I know it's a buzzword, but for me, it's not only about efficiency and it's not only about making sure that we can deliver the kind of services to our community that they are going to expect, but also it's a critical tool for employee safety in a lot of industries. It's also, as you mentioned, a really, really necessary retention component. The more that we can have the workforce learn and adapt to new skills and new learnings, the more attractive we'll be as a place for people to come and work. So for all of these reasons, it seems like we ought to methodically and comprehensively plan for that, and also to think about what resources it's going to take to ensure that each and every department has a level of expertise, competency to manage the incredible pace of change that you outline every 12 to 18 months. It seems to me at first blush that we're not looking at a DTS that's going to be sized as it is moving forward. If we're going to do all of that and also manage the incredibly important increasing risks in cyber. So if you could just project out, what are you thinking about what it's going to take to make that planning, and what kind of a size department relative to what we have now are we likely to see in the future?
Well, as I said, I alluded to, I do not believe you're going to see a central IT shop that's going to be another 10 times the size it has. We're fortunate that people are coming to the workforce who have those technology skills. One of the things I talked about with these communities of interest on a very small level is something called, and as soon as I say it, I know we're going to get laughter here, but robotic process automation. And what that means is you identify those analog processes that are annoying to the staff that are coming in. How could we manage them better? How could we affect it? It could be invoice processing, where it takes maybe 30 minutes a day to process the charges that the fire department gets from ERMS units. Those things can be automated. So having staff that understand this, subject matter specialists, firemen who understand what the costs are, and to be able to automate that means all of a sudden we're making the industry work better. And we're actually being more efficient in terms of the provision of services. So if you step out a bit and say, okay, what are the bigger themes we're going to face? The immense innovation that's taking place in national landing at a scale, there's nothing like that in North America that's happening. And what we're doing is we're bringing together folks who are looking at those emerging trends I talked about: AI, cloud, machine learning, Internet of Things, cybersecurity. We can learn from that and apply that as appropriate and necessary in the community. And we're going to have to, because there's that balance between privacy of the individual and data that the government needs to be able to do its business better. How can it achieve that? So what we've done, a lot of the work we've done, which is not in this budget document, is to work behind the scenes with transit. And we're working very closely with them in terms of understanding how are they managing curb management right away, deliveries of goods in particular areas that are crowded. We're working with public safety, fire and police, and we're talking to them about what's their vision for the future. Not looking at, do we need more toys to be able to do things, but what is their role going forward? And if you talk to the fire chief, David Pavlitz, he'll talk about less reliance on his services because we've done more to provide for the care of the community in other ways. And so we're looking at those types of things. I think that's where we're going to see the greatest growth. We're empowering other departments to understand what that means and make a difference in terms of how they provide the services to the community. So, long-winded way of answering your question, I don't see the department growing 10 times its size. I think there are areas we've got to improve on, we've got to build on, and I wish I could get more resources to do those things I have to do. But I think going forward, it's engaging my partners, my colleagues, to embrace what we're trying to do. The message we're having right now, the discussion right here, I think is so important. And you'd be surprised in that robotic process automation. We brought in Microsoft to talk about that. We had at least 7 departments that said, where do I sign up? How do I do it? And departments you never think would have thought about doing that. But they said, I'm frustrated. I can't keep staff because they say we're working the way we did 30 years ago. We got to change that. So I think I'm encouraged by that. And I think that's something, as a county going forward, that's something we need to leverage more. And again, that's providing not only training for my staff, but training for the staff in the field.
And if I could just follow up briefly on that before I turn it over to you. I get what you're saying, and I'm certainly not asking for DTS to grow to be 10 times its size, but I want to make sure that we have a plan for innovation, because one of the things that's concerning about the circumstance that you just described, if we rely on departments to actually articulate how they need to innovate, that's likely going to come with their being frustrated by the processes that they have already, which is part of that delay in being at the forefront versus behind the times. And I think, as we think about all elements of our community where we need to be flexible and fast, it's so that we don't wither. We're competing with lots of other entities out there, and if we're a step behind, we're losing. And so I just want to make sure that we have a thought and a plan for how we're going to make sure that departments know that, the way we do these things manually can be done in an automated way at less stress, less cost, whatever. You manage, if you want to have them manage the deployment implementation, I have no opinion on that, but I want to make sure that somehow what your department knows is spread throughout the organization. And I'll
If I could just stay on this subject, because this is so important. You need a helmsman. You need a pilot. And the Greek call it Kubernetes. For me, that's the idea. You've got to be able to drive and orchestrate this. And so when I talk about communities of interest, it's not giving them technology and say, nice seeing you, we're gone, but it's being actively involved in procurement and to make sure that what they're doing is aligned with the business goals of the county. If we don't do that, then we've gone through this how many times? Mainframe. Things are going to be better. We put a mainframe up, everybody just dumps things on it. We got rid of mainframes, we went to COT solutions, same thing. And we have an opportunity now, I think, to really drive this home by having a coordinated approach to how we do technology investment. And Mark and I have talked about this for years. We've never got there. And we've got to address that. Whether it's, and how you do that is, there are ways, there's the vehicles. Like, as Mary has talked about, a comprehensive plan, but there are other ways to do it as well. But I think we got to do that. We just don't have the time anymore to do what we've been doing in the past. We just don't have the resources, and we're going to lose them. I really believe you hit a key point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Garvey?
Yeah, just a little bit more. I mean, these discussions are always, they really get your head going and thinking in different ways, and appreciate it very much. So what it sounds like to me a little bit is that we do need a strategic plan, a plan of some sort, because what I'm sort of hearing from you is that the department needs to be going out into the organization, picking up and then bringing the organization back into the department, and a constant back moving like that to keep the information flow going and to get everybody kind of up to speed, because the speed keeps changing. And probably some sort of, a real sort of set strategic plan on how to do it. And I think you're obviously working on that, but I think we're hearing from our committee and others that making it more clear and intentional that everybody understands how we're doing it might be helpful. So I've just sort of make that observation, because there's a lot that needs to happen.
That strategy I talked about, I use the analogy with my staff and my colleagues about, and I remember this, probably Mark does as well, when we built the Transcontinental Railroad, Mark, do you remember that? The whole concept behind the Transcontinental Railroad was that everybody had different gauge cars they put on the track. It didn't work. And they said, we want to go from East Coast to West Coast. How do we do that? Easy. Everybody has a standard gauge car they're putting on the track. The track's a certain size. It's going at a certain time. It's going in a certain direction. You're going to stop at certain places. There's certain security and privacy that you have to follow. What we're trying to do with this cloud strategy is to implement something like that. Now, I'm not trying to belittle what you're saying or what I'm saying to Mark. Yeah, I think it's important we have everybody on the same page saying this is the direction we want to go. These are the important goals. And it's not technology. It's the business goals that to be achieved, the outcomes. To make life you want an environment. We talk about it a lot here. What defines a smart community? In many jurisdictions around here, take a banner down at the print shop and hang it on an old vacant building and they say innovation zone. We don't want to go there. What we want to do is have a situation where people want to come, work, live, play, educate, and they feel safe living in an environment. And I think we have an opportunity to do that if we do it right. And that's what I'm trying to say.
Right, and make it explicit so everybody understands it. So that's a couple other just really super quick things. Glad to hear about the Wakefield intern. I hope do we have a little bit of a pipeline of interns from our school system coming into the DTS office?
He was the first junior college intern we brought him. We got him from schools. Actually, he was working over there. And we brought him in, and he took off, and I saw him his last day here, and he said, I'm apologizing to leave, but you guys prepared me. You gave me those skill sets. And that's the idea behind the intern program. It's not just a we get benefit, but the people who are coming in get the benefit.
Sure, and sometimes they come back again. And then the whole regional approach, I think, is great. I'll follow up with you. I've got some more thoughts about that, Mark. I'll follow up with you later. Yeah,
Thank you. And Mr. Karantonis, did you have another round of questions?
I will just tell you what I'm missing. The other day, we had here a conversation about Permitarlington, for example, which I believe is one of the most interesting things for me, because I'm trying to track how well we implement e-governance, because this is a really difficult interface. You know, everything has to be bespoke, everything has to be reactive to people having different plans, etc. Yet the electronic gateway to ask for a building permit has been maturing over time. So this kind of, I was struggling to find, I know that DTS is involved, but I was struggling to find how DTS manages, directs, shapes the form with which we will be delivering e-governance services in this department and other departments as well. What is the managing philosophy of that? That's what I read when I talk with our commission, etc. When they say we want some sort of comprehensive planning approach to that, I sense that this is what they are after, to have something that says, this is how we do business here, and this is good for the zoning department, as it is good for the Department of Human Services, etc. And I know that this is difficult. I'm not going to, this in and out that Ms. Garvey just said. So that's what I'm trying to find in the narrative here. I know it is there, and I see that in other initiatives, like, for example, digital equity. That's just, it's probably not a question, just a comment.
I know we have performance measures here, right? And I'm not sure they're effective in terms of communicating what we do in my department. Now I won't talk about other departments. But I think we need to consider adopting a different way of reporting and how we achieve our goals. In the private industry, Intel, Google, and others, they use something called OKRs, objectives and key results. They set out critically, here's our objective, here's what we're trying to achieve, the outcome we want. And how do we identify the progress we're making towards achieving that? We've done that in our e-government master plan, not as successfully as I would have hoped. I would have hoped that would have been adopted across the board, but it hasn't been. But I think you're right, you're hitting on something that's important.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry.
Just one more, I think
Sure.
it's quick. Thank you, Mr. Belcher. So, looking at your budget considerations, the need to reskill the workforce and make sure people are trained on the latest technologies and competencies, putting that into my mind as you talk about the great retention rates that you've had, which are really admirable, by the way. I'm glad you highlighted that. But as we think about providing more skills and training for individuals, that can have the effect of making them more attractive to others who may try and poach them. So how do you balance the whole idea of providing that training with hopefully retaining these staff, with retaining the staff over time so that we can most benefit from that training? Do we have any sort of loyalty commitments, or have we never had to resort to that?
Probably not, you're not going to like hearing this, but when people come on board with me, I ask, how are they going to know they're successful in 3 years from now? And I tell them that you've contributed something, you've learned something, and we've gained something. At the end of 3 years, if you decide, you know what, I found a better job and I'm going to leave, I've done a good job as a director. I can't, to say to somebody that when I used to work at the Securities and Exchange Commission, you had to sign an agreement that said you had to stay certain years, and you couldn't go work for a broker-dealer on Wall Street. A lot of people that wouldn't work at the Securities and Exchange Commission because of that. So I've taken that approach. No, we don't have a way of insisting upon loyalty. Why people stay, it's a combination of those factors, but they have.
I'm going to call it a win and not ask any more questions about it. But so.
Yeah, it's like, give anybody any ideas. Yeah. All right. On that note, it is. And don't push it. All right, on that note, Mr. Belcher, thank you so much. We really appreciated the conversation and the opportunity to get into some wide-ranging and forward-looking trends. If we have any further follow-up conversations or questions, we can put them in writing.
Thank you for the time. Thank you for recognizing Mrs. Staninsky. I know his family are going to watch this, and hopefully they'll appreciate the comments. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. We're thinking of them as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. We will move now into presentations from Arlington Economic Development. Mr. Schwartz, do you have any brilliant words of introduction for our
I'm just very disappointed that Telly isn't going to be performing this on the piano. It just
You don't
leaves-
know that.
it-
It could
no,
be on
well,
the phone.
I know, but I know Miss Garvey and I had been secretly hoping.
There are three parts to that, and they're all three are like.
Next year.
Welcome, Mr. Tucker. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you for having me. So thank you. First, let me say thank you, Madam Chair, members of the County Board, Mr. County Manager, for the opportunity to speak before you this afternoon. I want to thank my staff for their continued hard work over the past 2 years, many of which my leadership team members are here. I think a few of them are also joining us virtually, but they've really had to balance responding to urgent business needs during this pandemic over the last 2 years, and then similarly think about longer term initiatives to help expedite Arlington's recovery. Next slide, please. I believe it's never been more important for us to think about our department's mission, how we position ourselves to emerge from the pandemic as economically vital, competitive, and a sustainable community. The focus of this presentation for today and much of our strategy and a proposed budget is framed from the context of economic recovery. Next slide, please. So let's start by looking at the office market vacancy. I think on slide 4, you'll see there a metric that a trend line that we monitor very closely as one of those indicators of how healthy the economy is. This trend line illustrates the challenge before us. In the fourth quarter of 2019, after years of proactive economic development efforts, the county had its lowest vacancy rate in nearly 6 years. Now, the DC region, like many other office markets, is suffering from high vacancy, and Arlington's particularly is the highest in the region, near its 2015 peak. While some of the vacancy can be attributed to known lease expirations, the pandemic has countered much of the vacancy progress that we had made over the prior years. Many of those decisions that we would have backfilled space we lost, those decisions have been delayed or tabled in some cases. Next slide. It seems almost weekly we learn of a new tenant in Arlington that's either putting their space on the market, some space on the market, or adding some of their space to the sublease market. Currently, our sublease market is more than twice what it was for pre-pandemic levels. Yet these trends do vary by industry. We continue to see a trend whereby some tech companies are actually taking more space and growing, and other sectors are shedding space, such as nonprofits or associations. The way companies work and has changed and continues to fundamentally change. Their companies and their workers want more flexibility. One of the recent surveys, some of Arlington's largest employers indicated significant shifts toward hybrid schedules with employees in the office 3 days or less. Given the importance of the commercial office space to the county's tax base, these shifts do represent some risk and exposure for the county. In addition, these office conditions continue to negatively impact small businesses in the hospitality industry, which depend on office workers and business travel customers. Let me take a moment to say we've done, and I want to thank the board for doing a fabulous job of supporting many of our small businesses through the pandemic with programs. What we've been able to accomplish with the help of the federal resources, state resources, and local resources should be applauded, and we have received positive feedback from many of our small businesses. With that being said, there is no amount of subsidy that can sustain our small businesses in perpetuity. The thing that will expedite recovery and help our small businesses the greatest is by figuring ways to get bodies back into these buildings, as the indirect and induced impact of people working in Arlington physically will ultimately help our small businesses. Next slide, please. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to focus on some of the proactive economic development strategies that we believe help position Arlington to recover from this pandemic. The long-term impacts of COVID on the office market will not be known in its entirety for some time, as there are some leases that are still in the middle of say, a 10-year term and have yet to expire. So we don't actually know how they will affect the overall vacancy rate until years to come. There are several things we do know, however. There is more office space available alongside shrinking demand for space. This will continue to put pressure on rental rates and eventually assessments, which directly affect our budget. This is leading to greater competition for office markets. The phenomenon is unique to commercial office space because demand for other types of space, including manufacturing, flex space, industrial space, things like wet labs or data centers, are actually increasing and have continued to increase during the pandemic. I believe communities that are flexible and proactively revising and revisiting their policies and processes to be in line with the changing demand of the markets are best positioned to capture this growth. I'll take a moment to recognize the work that CPHD is doing, and we are partnering with them on commercial market resiliency. I think it's critical work that we'll be working on over the next year. To keep Arlington as a vibrant community where people want to live, work, and play, we must continue to innovate and invest our resources in ways that meet the needs of the times and this rapidly changing market. Next slide. Given this landscape, AED is proactively focusing its resources in three key areas, or three buckets as we commonly refer to them. One, as a targeted business attraction and retention efforts, leveraging new collateral like our rebranding and our website, and returning to in-person prospecting activity. Secondly, cultivating and catalyzing the entrepreneurial ecosystem so that homegrown startups mature into larger office spaces, using employees and continue the innovative spirit that Arlington is known for and the activity we aspire to see more of in our market. I will note that we have seen significant numbers of new startups even in the midst of the pandemic. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Our third bucket is around regulatory flexibility. We're extremely supportive of the efforts that CPHD is leading, and we're willing to devote a targeted staff expertise to advance this effort, which I'll discuss also later in this presentation. Next slide. Let's begin with talking a little bit about small business and our BIDS launch team. Next slide. As has been the trend in the past few years, demand for BIDS launch services continue at a fast pace. With the addition of an ARPA-funded position in the FY22 budget and included in the county manager's FY23 budget, proposed budget, the small but mighty team of 3.8 FTEs and an intern supported an incredible number of small businesses. For example, the team conducted 267 one-on-one consultations and had over 2,000 workshop participants over the past fiscal year. There is considerable demand for services from small businesses still suffering from the impacts of COVID-19. 552 requests alone in FY21. At the same time, we're also seeing many clients who are first-time entrepreneurs looking to start businesses as part of the Great Resignation trend nationwide. Due to the county board's leadership and steadfast support, BizLaunch has been in a position to offer impactful programs to our clients. We've moved from innovative concepts to tangible tools that build strong and sustainable businesses, like our new business databases for market research, providing e-commerce sites through the Relaunch program, and 2 rounds of small business emergency grants that provided direct assistance to 468 small businesses, 69 of which are represented by either minority and or women-owned businesses. And while I address equity efforts directly later in this presentation, equity is and has always been part of the fabric of the BizLaunch program. Through the rest of the year, you'll continue to see that focus with events to support women and minority-owned businesses like the upcoming SWAMI Awards in May. I want to thank the county manager and the board for the inclusion of the ARPA FTE, the inclusion of funding for the ARPA FTE as part of the BIDS launch team for the upcoming FY23 budget. Next slide. Our business investment group, affectionately known as the big team, has been working very hard as well over the past year and a half. Despite the continued negative impact of the pandemic on the office leasing market, this team has continued to deliver on its metrics during the year. To date, the big team's FY22 projects account for 2,000 jobs and over 300,000 square feet of retained or new office space. We can continue to see traction in the technology sector and corporate HQ, and are excited to celebrate the opening of Microsoft's Roslyn office this spring. In addition, Big Team has carried out 400 plus business engagement activities with Arlington businesses and expects to exceed targets as well as we are able to resume in-person activity this spring. For this year's Business Appreciation Month in May, we are partnering with county leadership, our business improvement districts, and our universities to meet with approximately 50 Arlington businesses that we want to retain or engage through future collaboration. We hope to engage the county board as well in this effort, and you'll be hearing from us within the next month. With the Omicron variant receding, we have resumed in-person marketing missions and engagement with prospects who are moving forward on plans to relocate or expand their operations in Arlington. Along with our partners at the state level, AED is participating in 6 marketing missions this spring and summer, which translates to roughly 100 prospect meetings. Over the past 2 years, the big team has built an incredible team and expects to fill its 1 vacant position by the end of this fiscal year. Next slide. I want to spend a little time talking about our communications and marketing team. This dovetails nicely with the business investment group because our focus for the past 2 years has been on ensuring that we are well positioned to succeed in the post-pandemic environment by updating our brand, our look, and our website. It was critical to complete this rebranding during the pandemic period. The whole department, with support from our colleagues in DTS and community partners like our universities, our partnerships, and our BIDS, pulled together to produce a fresh look that articulates Arlington's competitive advantage. If you hadn't had the opportunity to check out AED's new website, we've included a link in the presentation. There is 1 vacancy on our communications team. We hope to fill this before the end of the fiscal year. Next slide. Our real estate development group, affectionately known as Red Dog, works with county colleagues and private and community public partners like the BIDS to ensure that real estate investment in Arlington is viable, competitive, and in line with the broader county goals. This year, much of their work was focused on increasing land use flexibility and addressing office market resiliency. Some of their highlights include helping to accommodate specific tenant needs for Microsoft's new office in Roslyn, supporting efforts to expand opportunities for new business types to fill vacant space along Columbia Pike, negotiating the dark fiber lease in National Landing's Innovation District to support Arlington's growing tech ecosystem that will be critical to recovery, supporting affordable housing developments such as Barcroft. And moving forward, this team will be leading AED's support of CPHD's office market resiliency efforts, which we believe is a critical piece of our economic development recovery strategy and a top priority for AED. Once filled, the vacant role previously held by Jill Hunger in AED will focus on supporting CPHD's efforts in this market resiliency work. Our next division that I'd like to speak briefly about is our Convention and Visitor Services team, which supports our hospitality and tourism sector. Although all signs are pointing to gradual recovery in our hospitality sector, we still have a long way to go to get back to 2019's record-breaking hotel occupancy and revenue levels. As you can see in the 2021 calendar, Arlington saw a significant increase in hotel occupancy as compared to 2020, but it's still down nearly 44% from 2019 levels. Revenue per available room, although up 31% from 2020, is still a stunning 59% down from 2019. On the bright side, barring any unforeseen developments, hotel demand continues to steadily increase in the leisure, business, and meeting and group travel segments, especially for April of this year and beyond. Visitation and engagement on the Stay Arlington website are up significantly, signaling active interest and exploration by travelers. Lastly, the ACVS team is already beginning to implement its new $3.25 million Tourism Corporation ARPA recovery grant. Our high-level spending plan was approved by VTC in February, and ACVS is proceeding with an array of marketing and sales activities that will take place through June of 2024. All of these efforts are focused on accelerating economic recovery by increasing overnight hotel stays and spending at local businesses. We hope to begin seeing the impact of these investments starting this summer. There is one FTE that's included in the FY23 proposed budget, which is the restoration of a frozen position, a destination sales manager position, which if approved, we plan to hire early during the FY23 fiscal year. Next slide. Our Cultural Affairs Division, also oftenly referred to as Arlington Arts, plays a critical role in making Arlington a unique and vibrant location to live, work, and play. FY21 investments included new technology to produce and stream quality programming, has led to new audiences and expanded opportunities for Arlington arts organizations. This investment generated new audience and increased social media reach as well. Some of the highlights in FY22 include the Public Arts Master Plan, which was a culmination of a 4-year process responding to new county priorities such as equity and biophilia, and incorporates new approaches to public art, including creative placemaking, civic practice, and social practice. FY22 also brought engaging community art projects, such as the picture on this slide, which is visiting artist Amos Paul Kennedy Jr., which was in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the historic 1960 sit-ins, a milestone in Arlington's civil rights history. The Arlington Art Truck and Public Art Joint Project distributed 7,000 commemorative letter press cards featuring quotes by local history makers were at the 7 sit-in locations in cooperation with current business owners. Lubber Run Concert Series returned to in-person performances, and we're thrilled to have it, as well as the Columbia Pike Blues Festival and the Roslyn Jazz Festival, which is planned for this upcoming summer and early fall. The inclusion of a strong arts presence with studios, theater, rehearsal spaces, maker spaces, and public art is a recurring theme in the 4 Mile Run Valley area plan, furthering the planning goals. Next slide. I want to make sure we spend some time focusing on our equity efforts. In furtherance of our goal of normalizing ongoing racial equity awareness amongst our employees and normalizing those conversations, the AED Racial Equity Action Team has put together monthly presentations, trainings, and facilitated discussions to promote racial equity within the department. These efforts have enabled the department to incorporate the use of the equity lens in many aspects of programming, which has led to more intentional focus on how we design programs, initiatives, and market or deliver services to our diverse clientele. While AED is customizing our own internal database to better track demographics of those receiving services, we lack comprehensive data on minority business ownership in the county. This information is not collected by those businesses or entities that apply for a business license. This is a barrier to AED's work and a topic that we intend to dig into further in the coming year with many of our partners and community organizations. Next slide. The 4 initiatives highlighted on this slide represent just a portion of the current and planned work to support the county's racial equity and inclusivity goals. Relaunch. The program was designed to provide legacy businesses and businesses of color with access to consultants and to help bridge the digital divide and to have businesses compete during and after the global pandemic. To date, 55% of the graduates of the Relaunch program are minority-owned businesses. This slide features the minority-owned Lion Park Barbershop's new website that it received through the program. Aware grants administered by our Cultural Affairs team in partnership with the Arts Commission on these were designed to expand opportunities for artists of color and other represented groups. This picture is of Aware grant recipient Educational Theater Company. CAD was selected for a $150,000 NEA grant that will expand the program to add additional artists. Thirdly, the digital asset strategy and marketing in AED was representative of work from the ACVS team, whereby we are continuing our long-term effort to procure photography and videography reflecting all aspects of Arlington's diversity. Our new marketing efforts, like our website, our photography, video, intentionally focused on a more inclusive representation of Arlington's population, workforce, and business community. We all know that representation matters. From the business engagement standpoint, the last photo is an example of AED's activities to provide access and networking opportunities for minority businesses. This lunch, which was held at Ethiopian restaurant Dama, featured roughly 30 Black-owned businesses and Senator Mark Warner. In addition to these efforts, one of the items included in the FY23 budget is part of AED's equity focus. The Back to Work program is a tech credential training program for low-income, low-skilled, underrepresented, or long-term unemployed residents who were laid off from hospitality and other service sectors that were negatively impacted by COVID-19. At this time, I'm going to invite our Budget and Operations Director, Ifeok Obonga, to come up and talk about the next two slides, which summarize our budget and general fund changes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ifeok, and I am on the hot seat now.
Welcome.
I'll be presenting AED's budget slides, starting with our general fund and then moving to our tourism promotion fund. The FY 2023 proposed expenditure budget for AED is $9.7 million, a 9% increase from the FY 2022 adopted budget. This increase is primarily due to approximately $613,000 in continuation of APA-funded initiatives, specifically $88,000 for the small business support position in the Biz Launch program, $500,000 for the Relaunch program, and $25,000 for the Back to Work Tech Talent program. In addition to the APA increases, the Cultural Affairs General Fund budget is increasing by approximately $150,000, made up of approximately $65,000 of ongoing funding for the Lee Arts Center building maintenance, which is offset by an increase in membership fees and $85,000 in one-time funding for new arts programming at 2700 South Nelson Street. Moving on to revenue, the increased LAC membership fee will generate approximately $66,000, which is a 37% increase to our revenue budget. Next slide, please. For the Tourism Promotion Fund, the FY 2023 proposed expenditure and revenue budgets increased by over $1.4 million, which reflects a 128% increase from the FY 2022 adopted budget. The increases are primarily due to $1.3 million in FY 2023 allocation of the $3.25 million APA Tourism Recovery Grant from VTC. Please note our spend plan for the funds are $650,000 in FY 2022, $1.3 million in FY 2023, and the final $1.3 million in FY 2024. Other increases are due to higher revenue projection of $325,000 from the transient occupancy tax surcharge over the FY 2022 adopted budget. Continuation of county APA funding for marketing activities and other operating expenses, and the restoration of the destination sales manager position that was previously frozen in the FY22 adopted budget. I'm going to turn over the presentation back to Telly.
With some glee, it seems, actually. Happy to turn it back. Thank you so much. All right.
You wasn't kidding about the hot seat. I feel the warmth. In conclusion, the county board's leadership and tireless work of staff throughout this pandemic really has provided many of our small businesses financial support and valuable resources to help them weather this pandemic. The new ARPA resources from the Commonwealth are undoubtedly going to help increase the pace of recovery for our hospitality and tourism sector. Arlington's economic recovery does require proactive economic development programs and innovative solutions to adapt to office market changes. Building on the work that has already been done, the county will continue to need to be intentional in our efforts around regulatory flexibility and commercial market resiliency, tailored marketing strategies to attract new office users and think about new uses as well, and then competitive incentive programs to support our tech ecosystem, the continued development of that ecosystem, and to compete for limited deal flow. In addition, want to thank the county manager for inclusion of one-time funding for programming at the 2700 South Nelson Street. That piece of real estate was procured over the last year, and we are just kicking off the community engagement activities associated with programming that space, and we're very appreciative. This concludes the AED budget presentation. We're happy to answer questions and hear any feedback.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tucker. Before you hear from us, I'm going to propose we hear from our commissions. I believe we have Chair Sisk with us from the EDC. Is that right?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chair Crystal. I want to say, to say a good afternoon to all of you this afternoon, to Chair Crystal and other members of the county board and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to provide feedback from the Economic Development Commission at this work session at the county manager's proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. I'm a real usury Sisk, and I'm here in my capacity as chair of the EDC. I have been serving on the EDC since 2018 and have served as chair since January 2021. On behalf of the EDC, I want to express my sincere thanks for all you have done for Arlington's business community during the last 2 years. Your commitment to the business community was shown in your willingness to address horrific impacts of the pandemic by adjusting regulations and policies, as well as providing funds for grants and critical assistance. Our small businesses, especially those in the most impacted industry sectors such as restaurants, retail, and personal services, as well as our minority and women-owned enterprises, have truly benefited from your investment in their economic recovery. The EDC has been grateful for the opportunity to focus its work on understanding and addressing these recent changes to Arlington's economic dynamics. In a time of so much disruption, EDC members were able to serve a significant and collaborative role in the implementation of Arlington's 2 small business grant programs. For many months, EDC members worked closely with AED staff, energetically applying their expertise and community point of view so that nearly 500 of Arlington's most impacted small businesses received needed funds. I am proud of how the grant program helps small businesses from a wide variety of industry sectors and geographic locations within the county. But I am particularly proud that a majority of the awardees were women, minority, and disabled veteran-owned businesses. As we face continued uncertainty, especially related to increased commercial vacancy rates and shifting requirements of living and workspaces, Arlington will need to explore other pathways to balance the needs of businesses and residents. This may include thinking differently about development models that have served us well in the past and considering strategies that are more fluid. The EDC stands ready to engage with the government, community, and businesses to further these conversations. Looking ahead, we believe that the county manager's proposed fiscal year 2023 budget will enable the business community to continue to recover and grow. Additional funding for positions and programming will enable the programming to assist small businesses to continue and will jumpstart Arlington's recovery in the hospitality sector. Funds to support cultural programming are also important, as we know that investment in the arts is a vital component of successful economic growth and diversity. In conclusion, I want to express our support for funding AED programs and initiatives as expressed in the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget. Thank you very much for listening. We look forward to continuing to work with you to support the continuing vitality of our business community.
Thank you so much, Chair Sisk, and thank you for your partnership. I know particularly on the grants program, the EDC's guidance, support, helping get the word out was just invaluable. We appreciate you. Thank you. And also delighted to recognize Chair Quinana of the Arts Commission. Welcome. Thank you so much for your partnership as well, including on that novel grants program that was featured under equity and everything else that you all have done. So look forward to hearing your comments as well.
Thank you, Chair Crystal. And I want to thank Chair Sisk because we also had opportunity to liaise and work with the Economic Development Commission in the past year. So really appreciate that. So thank you to the County Board for providing this time to give some comments during your budget work session. Of course, my name is Anika Quinana, and I'm the chair of the Arlington Arts Commission. My comments today are specifically around the arts and our needs within the arts community, and I'll speak from the lens of equity, which I know is critical to the county's concerns at this time. I speak on behalf of our artists and our arts organizations that when we look at that race model in terms of who's missing, who's burdened, the issue of access to resources is what's underlying all of that. That said, I have to commend the arts sector because the arts sector is thriving in Arlington in spite of and inclusive of the impact of the pandemic. I've seen with my own eyes, and I'm sure many of you have seen how artists and arts organizations have pivoted, that word again, and were able to go into virtual formats. We were able to host for the past 2 Decembers our grantees to come to our commission meeting and share about, the challenges and the triumphs that they've had through the pandemic. And so we really support and are proud of our arts community at this time. One thing we do think about is that the arts can be exclusive, and this is on the side of Arlington residents or Arlington visitors, because there's not the ability to access an exhibit or a show, and we appreciate county funds that help to support that. So again, our lens is equity, and we've spent this past year really focused on equity, and we're really proud of our accomplishments. Last year, January, we passed our first equity statement, or we approved it as an internal process that took place in the commission. This is just a bit of an advertisement because on March 22nd, I believe I'll be, along with my Vice Chair, Ann Curley, presenting to you all our equity process, and we are excited to do that. But we do want to, just make mention of that and some of the accomplishments that followed that. We really appreciate, first of all, from the county, thank you for allocating $50,000 that we could utilize in the AWARE program to support artists that we might not have been able to support in our general grants program, and it does certainly pave the way, though, a small beginning does pave the way for our ability to integrate arts more deeply, request additional funds, and increase our outreach so that more artists and arts organizations can benefit. Following that, the National Endowment for the Arts did fund cultural affairs. in funding that was a real hot commodity across this nation. And so we commend Cultural Affairs and Michelle Isabel Stark for achieving that, and then being able to match the Aware Grants funds with those funds. So those are some of the accomplishments. Of course, I cannot bypass the Public Art Master Plan, which you all passed in November. Equity is definitely baked in there in that revision. But what we really appreciated, I have to say, was the robust conversation that ensued amongst you all as the board about the arts. We love to hear that. We love to hear you engaged. And so our priorities for this year continue to be around equitable access to arts resources. We note that right at the beginning of the pandemic, we had closed our Community Arts Advisory Committee that had been charged by the county manager to look at arts resources and how they're used. And we'd done that work and had several recommendations, a 70-page document. And so we started to kind of pick that up again, see what's still relevant there, see what we can still learn and build off of, and what we may look at differently with how the world has changed because of pandemic. And so we really continue to be concerned about art space for artists and arts organizations. I loved hearing our director speak about, all the space that is available in Arlington, and we certainly have a need for space among artists. I think we'd love for the county board to think about existing structures and levers that you could utilize to support the arts. I think about the Barcroft purchase and how that is a structure that will sort of be obviously be revitalized in different ways, and how art space could be included there. I want to, in this moment, just commend one of our local artists, Sushmita Mazumdar, who has been running Studio Pause at the gates of Ballston. And I was able to visit with her last week. And I know, Chair Crystal, you visited right after me. And just to see that work that is happening in partnership with affordable housing is just incredible. And Sushmita and her team have been doing that work, working with immigrant communities, working with young artists, allowing them to install exhibits in that space, running open mics there, so interdisciplinary work as well happening in that space for 9 years. For 9 years, been committed to that work. And so thinking about how that kind of work could be replicated in spaces like Barcroft and others, and just the ongoing need of the sector in terms of space. I cannot not mention, I suppose it's called Langston Art Center now, and the fee increase to membership, which has doubled the costs, to my understanding, for membership. That is a big concern for the commission and for the arts community. And so I'm sure you're going to get a lot of wonderful feedback about that. And we would encourage those fees to be reduced, because doubling the cost is going to be just impossible for those artists. So that's food for thought. And again, we are, as the commission, always trying to think forward. We want to develop a 5-year plan, and we really want to look at the impact of the arts from a data point of view. We'd love to have a consultant help us to develop some data visualization and have an arts participation dashboard that gives us information not only about who's participating, who's not, who doesn't have access, and so that we can really start to look clearly and in a data-driven way around public-private partnerships that we'd love to see in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chair Quinana. We appreciate that. A lot of food for thought and suggestions for thought for us as well. Colleagues, I'm going to propose that maybe we do sort of general AED first, and then we can move into some conversation about the arts and cultural affairs. So let's begin. Ms. Garvey, did you want to start us off?
Sure. I had a question because it struck me, Mr. Tucker, having been through a couple of iterations now of this vacancy rate. In before times, and before you came here, a lot of the focus was on having to provide financial incentives for businesses to come. And that was something new that was, controversial and something we tried to avoid but sort of had to do. It seems to me now you're not talking much about that at all, but you're talking much more about the need for flexibility in zoning and permitting and how we, provide flexibility for businesses that want to come here. Is that a proper takeaway, or am I wrong on that?
I wouldn't say you're wrong. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's probably that we need to be doing both. Fundamentally, whether we agree with the ideology of providing financial incentives as a way to attract business or not, it is the landscape of the competitive market that we are in. And if Arlington wants to be competitive in recruiting and attracting industry, we will have to provide incentives in order to compete with similar jurisdictions all around the globe that are competing for some of the same projects. I do think that the work that we are focusing on around regulatory flexibility opens up opportunities for a broader base, a sector base, to represent Arlington, maybe some uses that we in years past hadn't considered. And then also evolving sectors, things that look a little different, that are, the pace at which the businesses are changing and implementing new technology and new business models. They are not well defined in some of our zoning ordinances and some of our site plans because quite frankly, they didn't exist 10 years ago. Some didn't exist even 5 years ago. And I think when we go through periods of time where, like what we've seen over the last 2 years, we have these chaotic events that really disrupt our way of life. Out of those times comes innovation, quite frankly. And I think we're seeing that with the number of new entrepreneurs. I think that we're seeing it with the types of businesses that are coming. We had a brief conversation earlier this week about things like micro-fulfillment centers. Many of us would have never thought that, sitting in my living room, if I wanted to call somebody and say, I need a toothbrush and toothpaste, it could show up at your door in 45 minutes. Those types of things are really, I think, an innovation that's been accelerated as a result of the pandemic and people's inability to maybe go out and travel as much as they want. So to answer your question, I think we need to still be supportive of both. I think we want to be responsible with our incentives. We want to assess their impact for greater public good. But I also think we have work that we can do on the regulatory flexibility side.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then how, I just sort of missed it, how is that reflected in your budget request? Is that reflected in a particular?
It's not necessarily reflected in our budget. Most of our conversations around incentives do come on a case by case, which we discuss usually in closed session as that prospective client comes. But there is
future things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
We did talk about some of the support around the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the system that supports this culture of catalyzing and cultivating new ideas, new generation, new businesses. We know that even some of our businesses, Amazon, for example, encourages many of their employees to think about how they become more innovative. And if they develop new intellectual property or new technology, they're actually encouraged to commercialize that. Even sometimes if that means they're leaving the company and becoming entrepreneurs themselves, they support that type of creativity and innovation. And I think some of the conversations we're having at the staff levels now is how do we repurpose some of the existing programs or programs we've had in the past, like our Gazelle grants, for example. How do we repurpose those in a way that cultivates more entrepreneurial growth and creativity in that sector? And so while it's not included necessarily in our FY23 budget, I think we will continue to have conversations with the county manager's office, and I'm sure he'll be sharing some of our thoughts with you all on ways you can support that going forward.
That's great, thank you. And it did occur to me that the subletting, the commercial space, I don't think you might have termed it a different way, those could be small companies that could grow, and actually that may be growing a little bit of an ecosystem as it is, if we can hope, possibly. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. DeFranti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Tucker, for the presentation and all your work. Appreciate your leadership team also being here and our two chairs for joining us. I really appreciate the slide on travel and tourism that mentioned the spend out, because I had a question there. And what I don't want to be doing is fighting the market, but the way that 1.3 and 1.3 goes over the next 2 years feels like accelerating the market now that, fingers crossed, we're in our next stage. So really appreciated that. My question is a little bit about whether there are any lessons yet. I felt like we got pretty granular, very helpful out of grants 1.0, and we were at a different moment. I think last week there's evidence on PPP, and just the effort was to get money out. And I don't know if over the coming months or so, grants 2.0 might give us some lessons, and I'll sort of signal my hope that we keep, accelerating on the market, because there are a lot of spaces that are open, retail spaces, and I wish the cost, I feel like landlords are looking for a 10-year lease, a time that preceded COVID. And so any lessons from grants 2.0 and any thoughts about how we can spark small business to accelerate a recovery without, that's relevant both to tourism as well as small businesses.
Sure. And what I'll do is maybe invite Tara Palacios up. I think she's here today just to share her thoughts. But while she's coming, in the design of Grant 2.0, it was different from the first in the sense that we really wanted to try to target those businesses that did not have access to federal or state funds. And I think one of the things we learned is that, which could be a good sign, is that far more businesses actually did receive some federal or state subsidy than we had anticipated. Similarly, I think one of the things we learned is, by definition, hard to reach businesses are just that, hard to reach, and that there's still a significant number of them out there for numerous reasons that still haven't been able to take advantage of some of the programs that are out there. Even with the grants that we were able to deploy as part of Grant 2.0, we still saw a tremendous amount of applications from people who had received funding previously, whether it was from state or whether it was from local or even from the 1.0 grant. And those funds were put to use primarily for rent and for employee wages and benefits. But it was just, it was one shot in the arm at a period of time. There's still ongoing need as the pandemic has lingered for 2 years now. So those are some of the lessons that we've learned. I'll maybe let Tara share her thoughts on lessons learned and any proactive things that she envisions and is planning as a result of the feedback she's hearing from businesses.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the question. My concern as we move forward is that the businesses still need access to capital. It's something that we're continuing to hear. We had invited the SBA district director to talk to us about the status of PPP and EIDL, looking at how the Build Back Better isn't coming back, and some of those funds are actually starting to close with no hopes of reopening. We're kind of in a quandary a bit in being able to help them with access to capital. We are still helping them through the relaunch program because that's an aspect of being able to gain additional funding. The state just did a program on capital just last week, and they had over 200 people sign up. They had like a standing, room only for it. So I think access to capital continues to be an important need. When we did Grant 2.0, a majority of the people used the funds, over 50% of the people used the funds on rental assistance. And so being able to get long-term leases is also very hard, especially for existing businesses. So we know there's going to be some challenges, especially as you're seeing some development along the pike as well, and in other areas. Are people that are existing in those communities, are they going to be able to afford? And so we're hoping through relaunch and some of the programming, we're got those business databases and really appreciate the board's support on that, because we have real-time data on what businesses need and trying to help them figure out the future. The good news that we're seeing is because of the Great Resignation, there's so many people that are starting businesses, and it's not just like your regular type people. It's, people that have a passion for things that they want to do. They've developed an expertise, and now they're just definitely moving forward. So we're kind of seeing this blend of the need to access to capital for existing businesses, and yet you have people that are jumping in and with new, fresh income coming into the pipeline.
Great, thank you. And I think I'm Mr. Karantonis' liaison, so I lost the Economic Development Commission, which is hard, but I went there. And I do think I might ask for a briefing just to gauge with you guys and through Ms. Flanagan-Watson, just to follow up on, to understand better a little bit the different components, because I still feel like there's a shot of short-term could help us, but we're also having inflation and at the same time want to be strategic about, I thought it was the right decision. There's some industries where a year ago, the hotel industry just was such a struggle. So I might just follow up there.
Thank you.
And just one follow-up, just to let you all know, I forgot to mention, we are planning to do another survey of the business community because that was so helpful when we were going through the pandemic. So we want to see where they are and get some of this information so that we can then pass it on to you all too, as well.
Excellent idea to ask folks what they need.
Yeah, hey, who thought?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Tucker, with regard to the vacancy rate, you'd mentioned just the frankly absolute flood of tenants not only leaving but putting their space on the sublease market. Are there any trends in terms of the sectors or the scale, larger businesses versus smaller, or the tenure, the amount of time those businesses have been in Arlington, about the businesses most likely to depart or sublet their space or list their space for sublease that could inform our retention efforts?
So I'll invite Marian Marquez, who is here, also to weigh in, but I haven't seen as much on a correlation between the length of time that a business has been in Arlington as much as it is the division of the sector base. So I mentioned earlier the nonprofits and the associations. A lot of them have derived a lot of their funding from in-person activities. Well, because they weren't able to do those over the last year, they were, a lot of the donations that come through those types of events were either non-existent or much smaller than they normally would have been. Some of them have been able to pivot and do things virtually. I serve on the advisory board of Path Forward, and they were able to do a virtual breakfast that was still relatively successful. But not all of our nonprofits and associations are able to do that. And so we've seen them probably to a greater extent put space on the market either for sublease or not renew leases. Marian, is there anything else you'd like to add on what you're seeing?
Good afternoon, all the board members. I think, Telly, you covered it. I think there isn't a trend per se, with the exception of nonprofits and associations who we saw were the earliest movers, putting their space for sublease. I think, we've seen across the board, regardless of industry, that a lot of employers are putting maybe not all of their space, but several floors. The good news is they still hold the lease and they're honoring it, but it does put pressure on the market and on the amount you can charge per square footage. And, that has a trickle effect over time. I think Telly noted in the slides that the level of the sublease space is more than 2 times it was pre-pandemic. So it's about almost 700,000 square feet at this time. And we've seen the notable exception is among our tech companies. So, otherwise it kind of across the board from nonprofits. We have Gartner, American Diabetes Association, Parsons, Jacobs, the building that we're in that has khaki. They vacated about 100,000 square feet. So it's pretty much every day we get notifications through our real estate database, and it's pretty astounding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful if there was something we could pinpoint, because that would tell us where to target, but it sounds like it's just across the board.
Yeah, I think the trend that we see with the tech companies kind of growing their space or retain or even expanding. I mean, most of the successes that we had during the pandemic, which were fewer, of course, than we had hoped, or in the tech sector. And so that's helped to validate assumptions that we had pre-pandemic of tech kind of being high growth and, you know, the subsectors of tech being the ones that we want to very actively go after. But we do have a very proactive retention strategy in place, and we have awareness of all the leases that are coming off. And Telly mentioned Business Appreciation Month in May. A lot of the companies we'll be meeting with are ones that we aren't engaged with now. We know they have a lease coming up, and we very much want to get in front of them to understand how we can influence their decision about downsizing or moving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, we look forward to helping however we can, I think, in that regard.
We really appreciate it.
I am going to ask the indulgence of my colleagues. I do need to leave at 5 p.m. Would you all mind if I just smuggle in one thought for follow-up on the arts conversation? Okay. Thank you so much. I do
You
have
can
the
ask
gap.
as many as you want.
I know, but I like to be collaborative, right? I'm trying to follow Mr. Tucker's model, who clearly is running a good ship where he elevates a lot of other voices, right? So this is mostly a thought, I think, for feedback or follow-up offline or in writing separately, or maybe a little more hashing out on my part, rather than conversation now, although I would welcome thoughts if you all have had it. One of the things that struck me, I'm really thinking about Chair Quinana's remarks about equitable access to resources in the way I think the term used was our arts community, right? Our artists, our arts groups, those based in Arlington making art here. And this has been a theme I've been thinking about a lot, right? The sort of needs of those groups. I have found often folks are surprised to learn that Arlington per capita spends really similarly to our surrounding jurisdictions on cultural affairs, but where it seems like we spend a lot less, relatively speaking, or the distribution is actually on direct support to arts and artists. And I was really struck, I thought this was somewhat borne out in the data measures, the number of public performances, exhibits, workshops, et cetera, by supported artists and arts organizations is, generally speaking, of course, the pandemic years are an aberration, but generally speaking, shrinking, and the number of performances, exhibitions, et cetera, presented by cultural affairs staff are growing. And I think we see a lot of really awesome professional arts and arts events coming to Arlington. The programming is, really high caliber. But I am wondering and thinking a lot about whether this is the right balance. And so if there's more that you all could share with me about, industry standards to the extent that there are about how, cultural affairs or arts boards or divisions of government think about the balance of programming relative to kind of grants or in-kind grants to arts groups, how we know we've got that balance right. You hear a lot anecdotally, right? And, compare us to Montgomery County and everybody thinks about Strathmore or the Imagination Stage there, compare us to Alexandria, and people think about the Torpedo Factory and the Little Theater, and these are groups that the government supports rather than programming. But I don't really know whether that's anecdotal or industry standard or not. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about. If there's anything you can share about sort of how we benchmark that, I would really value it. And then one of the things I am thinking about, given that there is money, I believe it's this budget, for the one-time programming at 2700 South Nelson, whether that could be an avenue or an opportunity to try to really focus on programming with local artists. And so the feasibility of that idea, if we could get some reactions to that, would be great. I know that's kind of the intent, to convene to get a sense of the community interests, but if, what it would look like to support the groups that, as Chair Quinana put it, our arts community. So I don't know, any reactions I would be welcome, but I suspect that's for follow-up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think we'll put that together for you. I know Michelle Zibel-Stark already has some thoughts, and she's communicated those to me about the intentionality around incorporating local artists for using that space. But I'll take that back to the team, and we'll come back to you, particularly if there's a really interesting question on the benchmarking and the balance between the two. So.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm actually going to hand the gavel over to Mr. Dorsey. Thank you all so much. And to our partnerships and bids, I look forward to watching along as I head to the airport. Thank you.
And if I could just follow up on your on the question. Yeah, just really quickly. I really appreciate that question too. I think with the arts, there's this, it's like a philosophy, and I think we need to probably have a discussion about it at some point. Arts classically were so, old dead white men, if you will, and wealthy people, and yet it really is something that absolutely everybody should participate in and do. And there's a real kind of, it's very different and a different way of approaching the arts that I think we need to think through a lot. And I would appreciate any guidance on how to do that thinking, because to me, we want everybody doing the arts. Yeah.
If it's appropriate, I'd like to give maybe Michelle Zibel-Stark a moment to come up and share her thoughts. Any that you'd like to share? No pressure.
I didn't hear the question, I'm sorry.
So if you could briefly restate it, that would be great.
I could restate it, but I think Mr. Tucker maybe would restate it better, because I think you took in both what I and Ms. Crystal said, and I think you've got a concept about how to, so I'm not the most eloquent person.
I think it was around, is an extension of what, I don't know if you heard what Chair Crystal said.
I did, yeah.
Is an extension of access, not being just for the wealthy or the privileged, but to the extent that your team focuses on taking arts to the people, to the community, to those who might not normally have access or even be thought of in the terms of art appreciation, art access, and just the engagement of that part of the community, if you can maybe speak a little bit.
Right, and maintain quality.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Sure. So equity has been a part of our work before I arrived 7 years ago, but the idea of getting arts out to the community is all about equity. And I think often in the arts field in the past, probably 30, 40 years ago, the idea to get more access or more participation in the arts was to lower ticket prices, to encourage schools to bring students on field trips to theaters. And what's happened over time, over 30, 40 years, is we've discovered that we need to meet people where they are. And there's a lot of reluctance on parts of people to go to theaters or no matter what the show is. So the current thinking is to really bring arts out to communities. One of the things that we've done is we received an NEA grant 2 years ago to start an Artists in Residence program with the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. And that grant was written based on the work that Sushmita Mazumdar has done, which I think Anika Quinana spoke to quite eloquently. And the reason that we were able to get the $150,000 NEA grant, we were one of 66 local arts agencies across the country to get the grant. That's out of 4,500 local arts agencies. The NEA funding is extraordinarily hard and very competitive to get. So clearly we are doing the right type of work because we are being recognized by the National Endowment for the Arts in the type of work we're doing. And we're very excited to be able to extend the AWARE grant that for the $50,000 we got last year, to extend that to a new cohort of artists and working in the 3700 building and perhaps in the 2700 performance space that's created based on whatever the community wants to see there. So I think we should be very proud of the work that we're doing from both the arts sector, the cultural organizations that exist here, the cultural organizations that come to work here, the artists that live here, and the artists that come to work here. This region, or the DC metro region, is very porous to artists. Artists do not stay within boundaries. They like to move around. So we have a large community of artists in the DMV that work together, that work for different organizations. They come in, they come out, and it's a very strong community. And we need to keep bringing those artists and those arts organizations to our residents, to our visitors, and to schools, much like we do with the art truck. I think is probably the most recognizable or iconic platform that we have for doing that. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, great.
And if upon further deliberation and conversation to Ms. Crystal's question, you have additional thoughts relevant to Ms. Garvey, please feel free to add it. Mr. Karantonis.
Oh, thank you. I'm going back to economic development.
Sure. Thank you.
The burning issue is that what you started with, and this wasn't good news. So this is a persistent vacancy rate. I'm really concerned about that. So from what I heard in the presentation, for which I thank everybody who collaborated to bring that to us, is that so flexibility, investing in flexibility, trying to have, offer different uses to different types of innovative ideas coming our way, promises some improvement there. And you even mentioned, manufacturing and things like that. And I personally am a big fan of urban manufacturing where applicable. I know that's difficult, but the question is, how do we focus on this? So it's just a zoning thing, or is it something that we have to put invest in our big, in our business investment group to go after sectors? If I hear their region is growing. Our unemployment rate is very low. We are back to better than 2019. It doesn't make, plausible sense to me that we are not looking at an improved performance in our office market. I understand the issue with subleasing. I understand that people, the impacts of the pandemic, they're still in hybrid mode. I understand the GSA that is probably not working the way we would like it to work for us. But at the same time, our economy is growing. So I would at least expect some, plateauing of the impact. But there isn't. The impact is still growing. And it's also, if I understand it correctly, it's also regionally not equal. So, for example, our Richmond corridor, the Richmond Highway corridor, is in a better shape than Ballston. So, my question is, how does this budget, the budget proposal, reflect an aggressive strategy to attack this?
It's a really, really good question, and probably a complex one that you and I could spend at least an hour talking about. So let me start with, you talked first, or you asked first about the flexibility and the expanding of uses. It's not a magic bullet to fix our entire vacancy problem. The thought and strategy around that is that we increase the supply or the volume of projects that are out there. When we meet regularly with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, we meet with them monthly, and they track what projects are in the pipeline really globally, and then which ones are Virginia actually well suited for, and then they even break them down by region. And one of the things that, as we talked about how we diversify our sector portfolio years ago, we started doing this to focus on tech companies as opposed to just being primarily federal government driven. That was a benefit. Well, I think this is the next iteration of that. I think the further diversification of the market into things like robotics, automation, some of those maybe even biotech, for example, wet lab space. These are things that help strengthen the market as well. We know we still have a significant amount of what's referred to as brain drain, where we have people who leave the region as well that could, if opportunities were available in different sectors, might choose to stay here. And so I think we are really having some interesting conversations. We had just a conversation, was that today or yesterday, with our chair and vice chair about how we approach one of our challenges. It's not just the zoning. It's probably a combination of the way we have done planning for years, which is very responsible, and it has really set Arlington up for success over these years. But it's a system that's based on well thought out, maybe giving a considerable amount of time to thinking through these decisions and impacts. And what we're seeing now is the speed at which industry is changing and evolving is just not aligned well with a system that takes a lot longer to evolve. And so what types of things can we do from a policy standpoint and from a practice standpoint to be more responsive to that rapid change that we're seeing. So I think some of it might be zoning, some of it might be site plan related, where we have allowable uses that are approved as part of site plans that were approved 20, 30 years ago. Well, some of the uses that are coming before us today for consideration didn't exist then. And so should all of them require things like site plan amendments, for example? What autonomy or decision-making should be afforded to staff at that level, or a simpler process? So we're exploring a lot of these things. Some of that is not directly reflected in the budget, but it is under the umbrella of commercial market resiliency. That work is on the planning work plan, and AED is actively engaged in that, as well as the county manager's office and a number of other folks around the county. To the question around the investment on to the big team and how they go after some of these opportunities that are going to be out there, I think we have a really high performing team. Over the years, we have deployed our funds to be used in different ways based on what we've seen in the market. Certainly, I think there's a correlation between the amount of resources that you have and how much you can reach. And if you had more resources, undoubtedly you could reach more people. And in the more lines that you have in the water, to use a fishing analogy, the more fish I think you will catch. So I don't want to make it seem like we're so understaffed that we can't accomplish some things, but certainly, if you have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow you'd like to toss our way, I think Mark and Marion would tell you that her team would gladly perform and increase the numbers of wins that they would have overall. That's the goal that they have, and that's what they're there for. And I think they've been very effective given the resources that they have. You will be hearing about some new ideas that we have on ways that we support, particularly the tech ecosystem. We started some conversations with those internally, with the county manager's office, on many people think about places like Silicon Valley as a place where entrepreneurs go and then they figure out how they're going to innovate and start a business there. And when one fails, they stay there to start the next one because it's got a reputation of the talent, the creativity, the innovation, and the support that everyone supports you in your new idea, your new business. You're taking that risk. How do we build that type of culture here so that people associate Arlington with, this is the place that you go to start a business, because you've got venture capital, you've got angel investors, you've got universities, you've got talent, you've got a government that supports this. How do we make sure that we have closed those gaps in terms of what we offer here in Arlington? And that's one of the proposals that staff is working on really addresses, I think, some of those gaps that we've identified.
Thank you. That's helpful. I always thought about, quote unquote, marketing Arlington as also a place for other industries, like, for example, the green economy industries. That's a place that doesn't have really a home like Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. I would like to be a home for that. But the higher education sector, it goes perfectly with tech. Et cetera. So to be continued, I just wanted to explore whether we put the right amount of investment in our business investment group. So that's to me. The second thing is second thing that I'm concerned about is the support. I mean, we heard here that access to capital is the single number one issue for small business development. And this is we see that everywhere. And I'm not sure, I mean, during the pandemic, we had the ability to give grants, and we kept a lot of people afloat. That's great. Mm-hmm. Also, this boosted our ability to do the equity work with small businesses and to identify and to know more and to understand it. And I guess that the biggest, after the satisfaction of having kept more than 500 businesses afloat, or helped effectively 500 businesses, there is also a collateral benefit for us, because now we know better about them, because we had an intimate relationship of money. So what I see in the region is that the region is more than one of our neighboring economic development authorities, they try to establish a long-term program with which they signal to small business entrepreneurs, we can help you, or we can connect you to capital assets besides the technical assistance. It won't be a grant, it would be a loan. So we expect you to have a business plan, be very serious. It's not an emergency assistance thing. It's a growing assistance.
Mr. Karantonis, if I can make a suggestion, just given the time, this sounds like you're broaching Mr. Tucker's feedback to a policy idea, a great one, but I think it might be better if there was time scheduled where you could fully explicate it to him and get his considered feedback than trying to rush it through in this work session.
Okay, good. Fine. We can discuss that.
I don't want to be dismissive, but we do have 6 other speakers that we're trying to hear from before 6 o'clock. So I want to make sure we are fair to everyone. And in that vein, Mr. Tucker, I'll just surface a couple of areas where I'd love to either follow up with the department, or if you want to provide some comments in writing, that will be great as well. The first concerns the hotel industry and our convention and visitor space. One, there's optimism that I'm hearing in lots of circles that the hotel industry is primed to rebound to near pre-pandemic levels in 2022. But for a lot of reasons, I see that Arlington is not probably going to be in such a privileged place, given our over-reliance on group travel and international travel, which are still subject to either statutory restrictions or it's just not happening yet. And certainly being a secondary market to DC, we're probably going to be a little bit behind the curve of hotel recovery compared to other parts of the country. First, I want to know if I have that right. And then secondly, in terms of information, I'd love to know if we're tracking and have any data on how hotels retooled to the loss of room revenue during the pandemic, and whether or not we're seeing what might be changes in their operations or offerings or services that will endure regardless of the pandemic. And then 2, are we tracking and have any information on what might be vulnerable and distressed hotel properties where we could see ownership transactions taking place in the near future? And that's that. You're writing very fast, but I'll give you a chance to catch up. The second one is we've talked about this before broadly, but I have an interest in making sure that we are affirmatively furthering inclusive and equitable economic development. I know it's a mouthful, but for that, it means looking at our prospective businesses that want to do business in Arlington and trying to convey to them that generally we have a community interest in pre-development work, being supportive of disadvantaged business enterprises, that the actual construction work be done in a way that provides good jobs for the laborers who perform that work, that there are avenues to make sure that we avoid and protect against worker exploitation, that the permanent workforce, to the extent practicable, attracts local talent, that there are pipelines to diversify industry sectors that are disproportionately underrepresented by women and minorities, and that the service workforce that services those industries and those buildings, that those workers are subject to good labor standards. I mean, these are part and parcels of things that we've talked about disparately. I want to know if the department does or can conceive of ways that we can make sure that's explicitly known to all those that we court and engage with at a level of priority prominence equal to any incentives or other things that we sell. So I'm happy to get those in writing.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
How to do that. And your assessment of the hotel recovery is accurate. Yes.
Very good. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for that. I saw Ms. Cassell nodding, so I know I was on the right track. So that was great. All right, we have to shift and make room, and I suspect a lot of these folks are joining us virtually, but we're going to move forward with hearing from our partnership organizations. And the agenda order that I think we can follow is to hear first from the Columbia Pike Partnership, formerly known as CPRO, the Langston Boulevard Alliance, and then the Clarendon Alliance. So I'm going to suspect that all of those folks are joining us virtually. Is that true? All right. Can we start with Ms. Klingler, I presume?
Ms. Klingler, you are on mute if you are trying to speak. I see that you're here. You want to?
She may have gotten up momentarily. That always happens. So I'm going to ask if she is on, if Ginger Brown is able to speak, and we'll move to the Langston Boulevard Alliance and then circle back to the Pike Partnership.
I'm here.
Thank you, Ginger.
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome.
I was going to say Chair Crystal, but
you can say it, whatever. It'll confuse
members of the
people.
county board, the county manager, and Mr. Tucker. My name is Ginger Brown. I'm the executive director of the Langston Boulevard Alliance. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. This has been proven to be a very busy year for the Alliance. We've worked on 4 major goals and will continue to work on those goals in the coming year. Our first goal is to galvanize the community understanding and interest in the Plan Langston Boulevard planning process in order to get it through the finish line, and do that through stakeholder education and advocacy. We need to keep the vision moving forward. Plan Langston Boulevard LBA has supported and will continue to support Plan Langston Boulevard by conducting community engagement. And LBA has and will continue to be the go-to organization to help communicate, educate, engage, and troubleshoot. This year, during a 3-month period when the county was seeking feedback for the land use scenarios, we hosted 5 planning committee and community advisory meetings, 7 meetings with civic associations and staff, 3 walking tours, 2 LBA board work sessions, and we gave 12 presentations at civic organizations about the planning process and the plan. We hope to greatly ramp up our community engagement once the preliminary concept plan is released. And a special thank you to the project manager, Natasha Alfonso Ahmed, Director Fusarelli, and the whole planning team. Our second goal is to create effective placemaking and signature events to create experiences that connect people to place. This year, we celebrated the renaming of the corridor to Langston Boulevard, and we created placemaking that supports a welcoming and equitable place for all who live and work on the corridor. We did this. We commissioned a mural of John M. Langston at the Sport Fair retail store that was by artist Khalid Crosby. We hosted a historic walking tour of Halls Hill with Wilma Jones, the president of the John M. Langston Citizens Association, which discussed the history of racial injustice along the corridor and the community strategies to overcome and thrive. We hosted a ribbon cutting for the mural and a major reception to celebrate the renaming. We partnered with the Waverly Hills Civic Association to host a free, family-friendly day of festivities. It featured live music, food trucks, the Read book bus, and multitude of other fun and free activities. We organized a pop-up art gallery of local Black artists and historic heroes. The LBA worked with the Arlington Artists Alliance, Sandra Green, Dominion Lighting to curate the show of local Black artists. And we also honored local heroes such as Dorothy Ham and Edward T. Wharton. We partnered with Arlington Arts on the Langston Boulevard Zine Project. And just as a follow-up to a previous speaker, the Lee Art Center has yet to be renamed, but we are ready and willing to take on that renaming as well. And for all of the renaming work, a special thank you to Ben Aiken in the County Manager's Office and Angela Adams and Elizabeth Carriger on helping us with the renaming celebration and the mural. We also worked on more placemaking by hosting our first pit stop for Bike to Work, which featured Langston Boulevard small businesses. And I have to take the opportunity to let everyone know about our Earth Day Everyday festival that's coming, street festival that's coming up. We're actually closing down a street. And it will include 20 artisans, 20 environmental education booths such as Arlington Recycles, DES Stormwater. We have our Fresh Impact Farm, a special affordable housing sustainability booth. We also have 4 musicians, and 3 of the 4 are actual local artists that were curated by Cultural Affairs. Lots of fun art activities, the Arlington Art Truck, and we're also partnering with Arlington Artists Alliance again. So you can check us out on earthdayonlangston.com. And we hope to see you on April 25th. And lots of thank yous to all of the different county departments, Arlington Economics, especially Arlington Arch, CPHD, Parks and Rec, DES, Bike Arlington, Walk Arlington, the police, the fire department, and I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. Moving on to our third goal is to support small businesses and economic development. And we've been working to increase support for small businesses along the corridor as well as market the assets of the corridor to attract exciting new businesses. Thank you to all of the staff at AED for supporting us as we support our businesses. A special thank you to our liaison, Susan Soroka. We work with her all the time and she's fabulous. Emily Cassell and her team, and Tara Palacios and her team. And finally, and we are ready and willing, actually anxious to take on any work that involves alternative uses or flexibility in the permitting and development. And finally, our fourth goal is to improve financial sustainability as an organization and shift from piecemeal fundraising to a more stable development strategy. So thank you for taking the time to listen today. The future of LBA and the Langston Boulevard corridor is bright. And we respectfully request an increase to our grant of $166,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. And we'll certainly have any questions, comments from members of the board, but just know that your specific request for funding has certainly been received. And I'd just like to thank you on behalf of all of us for the tremendous partnership and for acknowledging the work of our staff. We would like to acknowledge the work of you and your volunteers on the board and throughout the community for doing a lot of great work together over the last year. So thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Oh, that was vestigial. Thank you so much. We literally, I think we have all received the request. This is very serious, under very serious consideration. Thank you.
All right, Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dorsey. Mr. Dorsey, appreciated it. Your comments kind of encapsulating. This is a very, because of the plan, this is a very big year, and community engagement will be a key piece of it. So just wanted to signal that you covered it, but just add that brief second to that. Thank you.
You, sir. All right, Ms. Brown, we appreciate it. Do we have Ms. Klingler back with us?
Yes, we do. My apologies. I just missed you guys. How is everyone?
We are well. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. On behalf of our board, our Community Advisory Council, and our Small But Mighty team, we want to thank you so much for investing in Columbia Pike, specifically the latest investments, Barcroft and the SunTrust property. We also want to thank you for passing the recent Columbia Pike Form-Based Code Amendment, which opens up our ground floors for new and exciting uses. We also want to thank you for sustaining our base funding during COVID. Without this base funding, we could not have done all of the things that we did with our Small But Mighty team. If the chat was open right now, I would show you our annual report with all of the things that are listed that your funding helped us do during the past year. We also want to thank our partners. We would not be here today and done the work that we have done without our partners, and here are a few. The Black Heritage Museum of Arlington, we have been hosting in our space, and they have brought new life and legacy to Columbia Pike in our space. VHC, the Arlington Free Clinic, and the Mary Marshall Assisted Living, our fellow BIDS and partnerships, and all of the restaurants who have participated and benefited from the Buy a Nurse Lunch program. APA, AHC, Our Lady Queen of Peace, our farmers, and Arlington Presbyterian, who are helping us address food security through our Feed Our Families program. Path Forward and La Casina for helping us provide hot meals to those who might not have a bed or a meal. The Pike Presidents Group and county leadership and staff, many of the departments that have already been mentioned today, for helping us stand up our State of the Pike, which really talks about our past, our present, and our future on an annual basis. We also want to give a special shout out to AED and BizLaunch. Through our partnership, and you've heard much about this already tonight, we at the Columbia Pike Partnership have been a force multiplier. And I think I stole that term from either Libby or Christian, so my apologies, but it was a great term. So what are the results of this multiplication? Legacy businesses on the Pike, some now have new homes when we thought they would be gone because of development. Some now actually have websites and e-commerce. And the majority of grants 2.0 went to Pike's small businesses, which is just great. We were able to do this in partnership with BizLaunch and leveraging our bilingual business engagement resources. Therefore, our ask to you today is that you help us formalize and sustain our bilingual business engagement resource in FY 2023 by providing one-time funding. This is an investment, not only in the Pike and our diversity, but we are now seeing businesses that we helped in the beginning of COVID now coming back to us and saying, hey, we have the ability to help you and help the community. How can we do that? So we want to thank you for your time and your support and commitment to the Columbia Pike Partnership, the Pike, and our diverse and inclusive community. Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed, Ms. Klingler. And as with the Langston Boulevard Alliance, we have received your materials which detail not only this one-time ask, but other areas in which you're interested in maybe some one-time partnership. And it's certainly remarkable hearing your work over the last year, how probably little of it was on then CPRO's work plan a couple of years ago, is work to be engaged with or partners to be engaged with. So we very much appreciate your pivoting the organization to be responsive to the needs of the moment. Questions, comments from members of the board? Ms. Garvey.
I'll just say ditto to everything you said, just to keep it quick. I think it really is impressive what you've done. Thank you so very much, and we'll take under advisement your request for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific. All right, thank you, Ms. Klingler.
And continue to do so. That's excellent.
Great.
Thank you so much.
All right, next we're going to invite Kieran Daly, who is the acting executive director of the only partnership that hasn't changed names in the last year. There we go. All right, Kieran, it's good to see you.
Hi, Christian. Thank you. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak here today. I want to thank AED, especially our liaison, Susan Sirocco, for her support this past year. We do currently have a vacant executive director position, and that very much feeds into our request for this year. But I come to you with great optimism and excitement for what lies ahead for the sector that we serve at the Clarendon Alliance. It's easy to forget that sometimes that our jurisdiction extends from the Virginia Square Metro just past the courthouse metro, because we are named similarly to a metro stop. But it's a big area, and in my first year as board president, I do want to thank you for the support to date and the work of our board and the supporters that brought us to where we are. Bridging this period without an executive director, I have a new appreciation for the requirements of this work, even having worked closely with CPRO for a number of years. And I definitely have a more thorough understanding of how important it is, especially to the small businesses that make up a great majority of our community. So with that said, in fiscal year 22, our board of directors remained vigilant to optimize our resources and really practice fiscal responsibility. We were able to minimize our office costs in ways that others were unable, but we put those funds good use where we could. And we focused on longer term strategic planning while still making new contributions to our community. Of course, we're known for Clarendon Day, and for 2 years, that really hasn't been a practical event in its normal form. So we reimagined it in 2020, and in 2021 we replaced it with through a new partnership. More on that in a bit. We've done a lot this year, mostly through my own work, but the members of our board, and all on a volunteer basis, as we kind of shore up funding for bigger plans that are part of our fiscal year 23 and beyond. And where needed, we supplemented with strategic hires for project contract staff, and that enabled us to do a lot. With the shifts of the past couple of years, we find ourselves in a year where we're actually supporting 2 instances of the Arlington Festival of the Arts. The first one happened on Labor Day weekend last fall, and it returns to its regular time this April, the weekend of the 23rd and 24th. There was a hunger for Clarendon Day, and even though that really was too big of a gamble based on where we were last spring, we did end up partnering with Arlington Arts to create a new concert series that happened in September through October, 4 weeks of diverse music acts, and it was so successful that we are doing it again this spring. Arlington Arts was very much a supporter, and we're excited to be working with Josh Stolzfitz and their staff to bring that back as well. We worked hard to maintain the urban village market, which has gone through a new permitting process, which is going to be revisited at your next county board meeting. And we also worked really hard to support our businesses. We were brought in to a number of conversations to consult and help restaurants work through the ever-evolving TOSA guidelines. Things changed through the seasons, and there was a lot of questions and support needed there. We consulted on new short-term parking zones with county staff, and we worked hard to promote the biz launch programs within our area. But the year's not over, and April 12th, we are partnering with HCVS to produce a webinar to help empower our local businesses to take advantage of the free resources through Virginia Tourism and their own activities to help aid in that hospitality recovery. We're working with ACVS on longer term through their grant program to help develop and support their needs as they bring in consultants and marketing professionals to take photography and enhance the representation of the Clarendon market. We've been working really hard on our own social presence. Our new county-appointed board member, Yasmin Mandali Alvarado, she's been great, and she's really grown our social presence especially on Instagram. So we've got a lot more public visibility, and we plan to bring back Clarendon Day this fall, which in addition to the Mardi Gras parade has probably been the most in-demand event since I've been in this office. And so the Clarendon Alliance is once again requesting an increase in our normal grant to $140,000. It does represent an overall increase of $60,000 over the county manager's current recommendation, but it represents the minimum our board has determined essential to make greater impact in the next year for Clarendon, while we work towards greater financial independence in the long term. Right now, we need to catch up with basic inflation, and honestly, we need more resources to make more competitive offer to qualified candidates to lead the charge for this organization in the executive director position. I think it's important to put it in context a little bit, the region that we serve. The Profile 2021 reports that the Roslyn-Ballston corridor has nearly 2 times the population density of the next largest planning corridor. We have twice the commercial office space, 3 times the amount of retail space as the Richmond Highway corridor, even when you take into account the planned development that's happening there. And we've got a lot happening here already as well. The George Mason development and the Clarendon sector plan update is progressing with additional density beyond the previous development projections. So there's a lot happening, more placemaking, more business recovery to support, and new business to support as people come in. We've been more than privileged to work as volunteers as we bridge this gap. But an increase to a $140,000 grant will bring the essential resources we need to move forward effectively. The partnership model works. And I think I'm glad to kind of follow Kim because I've learned a lot from her, and their work with the resources that they have shows what you can do to bring the community together and, you know, create greater results by working all together. So we seek to maintain and expand our general public and smaller group programming for businesses. Our evolving strategic plan kind of wholeheartedly depends on making a greater stride in this next year so that we can hire a professional who we can hopefully retain for a longer term. That has been the pattern in the past few years. We are in interviews right now, and so additional funds would definitely give us the flexibility to bring in a professional who can bring us to the next level. This investment in our area is worth it, and the partnership model works. So I thank you for your consideration, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Daly, and thank you for stepping up to serve in that acting capacity. Great news to hear about the plans to bring back Clarendon Day. I know our community has missed it. I've personally missed it. And thank you for the work over the last year under very difficult circumstances to keep the community engaged with sector plan efforts. And it goes without saying that the Clarendon area broadly, you can't think of any area that's been more affected by business, had their business plans more affected by closures and restrictions related to the pandemic. So thank you for enduring, and we'll take your ask for 60 additional thousand under consideration. Mr. DeFerranti.
Just a question. I may have missed it. Do we have that ask already in? I'm not sure.
I knew about it, but I can't recall if I read it.
I haven't received that, but it's okay. We will reach back and we will get that.
If you haven't sent paper yet, please do so, just so that we can make sure that we're accurately tracking it and considering it throughout the budget process.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a matter of process understanding for me. I'm new in this role, but it was part of our original request to AD, yeah. But I can get that to you for sure.
Perfectly understand.
Great, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, we'll now transition and hear from leadership of our business improvement districts. And I know at one point we were managing who was here when, so I'm just gonna throw something at the wall and see what sticks. Why don't we start off and see if Tina Leone, who is the CEO of the Boston BID, whether or not she is available? She is there, excellent.
I'm here, hello.
How was your flight?
Oh, I made it. It's on time. This was
good
awesome.
Stuff.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting us here tonight. I feel like I've been saying the same thing over and over again for the last several years, but the theme for us this year again is to streamline and focus our efforts. Fiscal year 23 is all about having a much more laser focus on our businesses. You all are well aware that we've had either had flat or declining revenues with our business improvement district. We've had to do more with less for year after year, and we've managed to supplement a lot of our programs with sponsorships, membership programming, et cetera. We had been working on bid expansion efforts. Actually, I've been working on it for 8 years, on and off in various levels of pressure and advocacy on that. We recently, explored that option again with much more vigor with our board of directors and executive committee in particular, and we still are not able to make significant progress on that. There seems to just be a lack of interest among the apartment owners to participate in the bid. That being said, we have the top 3 densest census tracts in the entire Washington, D.C. region. So the Arlington County's plan for Ballston has more than come to fruition, where people can live, work, play, learn, and just have a fabulous full life. We have had more residents move into Ballston during the pandemic. We had over 1,000 new apartments come on the market, and our overall apartment leasing is 94% at capacity. So we have about 16,500 residents in our tiny little BID district. That's not all of Ballston. The good news is we are still fulfilling our mission. We are working very hard. We are down to 3 people, but we are maintaining our level of programming. I can't say enough about my team. Thomas and Nick are amazing guys. They're doing a great job. We also have been doing incredible work as far as our marketing communications arm. Our audience reached this past fiscal year is 227 million views on TV, radio, and all of our social media channels. We've had 65 unique media placements, and we won 3 awards for our communications efforts. What this means, though, for us is that we are still going to have to reduce our programming efforts, especially our weekend programs. We will not be doing any weekend programs. And that unfortunately includes our Cars and Coffee and Bands on the Boulevard, where we had 15,000 people attend wildly successful programs. We are undergoing a strategic plan. This will be our 4th one in 10 years now. So we're excited about that. We have our consultant is StreetSense, helping us through that process. But again, our focus will be to, pretty much bring down our efforts to office, retail tenants, employees. So our events will be limited to weekdays, and we will be hyper focused on our employers, their return to office, and how we can support them and their employees going forward. So our strategic plan is will be completed by June for implementation in fiscal year 23. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leone. It's good to have you with us. And I do have a question before, of course, we give thanks for enduring during a time of great tumult and change. But 3% in light of what I presume are rising costs or more competition for vendors and everything else that's churning through the industry, is that going to have any impacts on what people are going to experience in terms of bid activities and work?
I'm not sure what the 3%.
The 3% reduction in revenues.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this has been a long time, coming. I mean, we've done more with less for many years, and my team has raised, in some years we've raised $500,000 to supplement our budget to be able to hold on to the weekend programs that we've done to support, to really, to make this a full experience here in Ballston. So yes, it will absolutely, the reduction. I mean, we finally gotten to the point, unfortunately, where we have to cut programming. I mean, of course, this is all coming, in the time of strategic planning. So, we're really looking for guidance from our board, and the county is participating in this process as well, to help us, really, target what the most important, programs, events, activities that we should be doing going forward to reduce office vacancy, support our restaurants, retailers, et cetera. And that's really where our focus is going to be. So, I mean, we even, toyed with the idea of canceling the farmers market, which I know we have one of the most successful farmers markets in the entire DC region as well. But I know if it's not being used by employees, then it was, we were inclined to cancel it. What we have found is that since 20%, we have a 20% crossover of people that live and work in Ballston. We have a lot of employees that use it. So thank goodness that will be saved. So, but yes, I mean, we're going to do our very, very best to maintain as much programming as possible.
Thank you for that. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you. So these are the consequences of what we were talking about, the vacancy rates, which, Boston has the highest vacancy rate among our commercial sectors, and that is a problem. So that reflects into less income for the bid and less of an ability to, to market the Ballston as it should, to actually, fight to climb out of this vacancy rate. So the question is, are there things that we could do that county economic development could do in addition to what we are doing that could be helpful here?
I think that's for you, Ms. Leone. If you have any top of mind thoughts about things to help with the vacancy rate, if you'd like to consider it and connect with us with other thoughts later, it's okay too.
It doesn't have to be answered right now. We can have a conversation offline about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of ideas, but our trend, our particular trend in Ballston is a fact that we're a 50-50 mix, and now moving towards a greater percentage of apartments and residential commercial properties. Our trend has been that we've had conversions from commercial to apartment, from office to apartments. That is going to continue. So our revenue, while yes, of course, the vacancy rate is important, and that does play into it, our bigger concern is that we don't have the apartments in the bid. And without them in the bid, it's impossible to serve the entire community with less than half the budget needed.
Thank you. Useful consideration. Mr. DeFerranti.
I will economize my comments because candidly, of the three bids, Ballston is the one I'm thinking of the most at this time. And I know that we'll be seeing the site plan on the Macy's site. There's a second entrance to the Metro. And then there's the United Methodist Church site that's going up. There's also the work on the Metro. I don't know that I have a question, just I think you made clear the size of the bid and the apartments issue, but I'm going to want to follow up and just encouraging and hoping that we can work through what's not an easy moment, and your work and the three of yours work is very important. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, and I'll just say, looking forward to, when is your strategic planning going to be done? I know you said you've been doing a lot of them, but you got another one coming up, right?
Yes, we are finishing up, and by the end of May, early June, the plan will be in place. Yes, the plan will be finished.
Well, I would love a briefing on that. When you get that pretty much pulled together, if you just have a meeting, that would be great. Thank you.
I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Ms. Leone. And then we'll now move to our next Business Improvement District. On the calendar is Roslyn, but I do know that we were trying to accommodate maybe Ms. Burick's schedule, but she is here. So, floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. Yes, thanks for having me. Really appreciate. I know it's getting late into the evening. I think you all have a copy of our work plan, which goes into all of the fabulous detail of everything that we've done this past year and our upcoming plans. So I'll stick tonight to a few highlights and offer some context as we think about the future. Throughout the pandemic, we've continued to deliver on our signature services, which we've loved doing. Our operations team has kept Roslyn safe, clean, and inviting. Our events and marketing team didn't miss a beat, pivoting our 200 plus annual events to virtual platforms. And of course, adapting our in-person programming. And our placemaking team demonstrated the BIDS' ability to quickly pivot and pilot new public realm solutions. So we supported the county's TOSIS program and the Vision Zero safety pilots. And through this work, I can say that we've strengthened our relationships, we've uncovered new opportunities, and really we've learned that we are now at an important inflection point. So our work plan not only outlines how we plan to continue to deliver in all of our program areas, but how we can lean into some new areas that we think really will propel us into the future. And to ensure that our work plan remains aligned with the county's priorities, we've increased our cross-departmental work significantly, and we've established regular check-ins with county staff, including AED, DES, CPHD, and DPR. And this really has proven very successful in meeting our community's needs. So tonight I'd like to highlight three areas that we think are key to supporting our evolution as a mixed-use neighborhood. And the first is marketing and events. This remains a priority. We've made great strides in increasing awareness and engagement, and I think we've established Roslyn as an urban, active, and connected community. And this success you'll see in the work plan is evidenced by some great increases in our social media followers, media mentions, and high attendance to our events. And we'll be creating new creative campaigns and digital strategies that will expand our reach, support our retail, and encourage a return to the office of employees and transit riders. The second area we think is really important is our public realm and placemaking. We've been testing new ideas and improvements designed to help people better engage with the neighborhood and each other. O2, our outdoor workspace, was a great example of this, which earned an international award for innovation in use of public space. And the beloved dog park in Gateway Park demonstrates, I think, what's possible when the community, government, and the BID collaborate. And with parks, we're excited to usher in a new master plan for Gateway Park, and will, of course, continue to be a resource for the Boathouse project. And with multiple redevelopments and transportation projects in the pipeline, we'll be increasing our collaboration with DES and CPHD. We will help to convene stakeholders, we'll test new safety enhancements, and really just take a holistic approach to identifying new opportunities during construction. And last but certainly not least, in terms of economic resilience, supporting our businesses and retails remain critical. We're closely partnering with AED and our property owners on business retention, compiling and sharing market information, and upleveling our retail support. So in closing, I'd like to thank you, our board members, for your continued leadership, and the county staff for their hard work and collaborative spirit. We, of course, are dedicated to Roslyn, but we also stand ready and willing to support Arlington County in realizing our community's broader needs and goals.
Ms. Burek, thank you very much. We appreciate your making the time, and I'm glad your prior meeting worked out for you to be able to join us. Thrilled at the level of work, always impressed by what Roslyn is able to do, and I'm glad you have a stable base of funding moving forward. Any questions or comments from colleagues? All right, so you have the thanks of all of us, and you have a good evening.
Thank you.
And last but not least, from the National Landing Business Improvement District is Tracy Gabriel on the line.
Thank you. Happy to be a closer. Good evening, members of the County Board. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our major accomplishments for fiscal year 2022 and our priorities for fiscal year 2023. I'd first like to take a moment to just thank the board, the county manager's office, the entire county staff for all your hard work and collective efforts over the past 2 years. Your perseverance and partnership have helped position the National Landing area and all of Arlington County for a strong recovery from the pandemic. And special recognition goes to our key county liaisons, Kate Payne and Shannon Flanagan-Watson. In fiscal year 2022, the BIDS priorities have continued to focus on supporting a strong comeback for our district. We successfully launched a second year of our $100,000 Love Local Small Business Relief Program, providing grant funding and marketing support to help dozens of National Landing brick and mortar businesses thrive amid challenging circumstances. We also conducted key research on the National Landing market and our emerging innovation district, and we're sharing those findings through various panels and tours, amplifying the positive story around the transformation of National Landing's neighborhoods of Crystal City, Pentagon City, and Potomac Yard. We continue to cultivate a connected and activated downtown through a range of in-person events, activations, and public realm improvements. The BID upgraded the front door to our district and celebrated a return to transit with a bold mural and plaza enhancements at the Crystal City Metro. Activations like Summer House, Winter Lodges, and even fun events like the Peppermint Mocha Latte competition brought the community together and delivered moments of joy during difficult times. We also continued to build a strong and welcoming organization and business community, growing our BID staff, and we really have a great team, and renewing our broader commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion through our Equity in Action community programming series and the upcoming publication of the BIDS Equity Framework. As we look ahead, the BID aims to continue to serve as a responsible steward of the changes underway and to be a national model for BIDs experiencing major reinvestment. In fiscal year 2023, the organization remains focused on supporting a strong recovery for retail, office, and hotels. Building community identity and sense of place through events, programming, and wayfinding, helping to shape the district's development, including a vibrant public realm, championing people-centered improvements, and supporting the county in its efforts to advance key plans, policies, and projects. So we look forward to working with all of you in the year ahead, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gabriel. Are there any questions from members of the board? I don't see any, so we would like to thank you. It's a common refrain, but the work has been really, really busy during COVID, and you all have really been at the vanguard of doing innovative and creative things while working to keep a degree of momentum that has accrued to the National Landing area, and you've done a great job with that. Glad you have a stable source of funding as well, and we'll look forward to continued partnership and conversation throughout the year. It is with that, colleagues, that we have concluded our scheduled agenda for today with our conversations with DTS, AED, as well as our partnerships and bids. So we will next convene next Tuesday, the Ides of March, at 3 p.m. We're going to have a conversation with our Department of Parks and Recreation, libraries, and then have a conversation about compensation with Human Resources. So with that, we are now adjourned.